What happens when the woman behind a billion-dollar tech empire is written out of her own legacy? This explosive story follows Ava, the strategist who built the brand, designed the vision, and then watched her husband steal the credit, the company, and her freedom. But while he celebrated in glass towers, she was collecting proof in silence. By the time he saw her again, she wasn't returning for closure. She was arriving with evidence, timing, and war.
For months, they sold a story about me to everyone in our circle. Isabel, the brilliant but fragile data scientist, cracking under the pressure of her first pregnancy, the hormonal possessive wife, consumed by irrational jealousy over her husband's success. When I first questioned Marcus about the late nights, he blamed my anxiety. He told our friends my brilliant mind was overheating with paranoia. His own partner at the firm, a man whose tech startup I saved from bankruptcy with a single algorithm, told our therapist she's always been prone to seeing patterns that aren't there. His lover Nina visited our home once, her eyes full of practiced pity. He's managing a global launch, she'd said, her voice like silk. He needs your support, not suspicion. For months in this gilded cage of a house, I didn't scream, I didn't fight. I just nodded, I smiled, I let him pat my growing belly, and I did something else. I started digging. The moment he boarded that flight to Tokyo for his big keynote, the foundation of his multi-million-dollar tech empire began to fracture. I'm so glad you've come to witness the demolition. Leave a comment and tell me which city you're watching from. I'm creating a worldwide web of support and I want to see your dot on the map. Fair warning, this feed blends raw personal drama with some hard won truths meant to hit you right where you live. Any similarity to real individuals is purely coincidental, but the lessons are all too real. The cool silk of my robe slides against my skin. I trace the rim of a coffee cup, a souvenir from our honeymoon he bought me. 3 weeks ago, I accidentally started a private data mining project. Every night since, I've used encrypted backdoors to pull server logs from the company's mainframe. The clicks of the keyboard are almost silent, my own secret code. A final, undeniable tally. 84. I lean back, staring at the encrypted file on my screen, completely invisible to our home security system. A perfect record of his deceit. A log for every single day he's lied to my face since I told him I was pregnant. Every single night I gathered a digital reminder of why he wanted me sidelined. Not because I was unwell, but because I was the only one who could expose him. The automated blackout shades retract, revealing a stunning view of the Seattle skyline. It's November. A cold rain streaks down the floor to ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound. My husband, the celebrated tech genius Marcus Thorne, is on a plane to Japan, probably sleeping soundly. He thinks I'm asleep too, resting for the baby. He is the only person left who doesn't see the storm that's coming. I press my fingertip against the mousepad, hovering over the final compressed file. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning Pacific time, a single email will be sent. And by the time Marcus steps on stage, he will find out his entire kingdom is built on a lie. I sit at my glass desk and open my laptop. It's my personal device, the one he thinks I only use for baby blogs and online shopping. He doesn't know about the triple encrypted partition hidden behind a folder I named Third Trimester Meal Plans. 342 pages. I call it my Chimera protocol. It took me months to compile. Every line of my original source code he claimed as his own. Every manipulated data set he used to defraud his investors. Every biometric sync from his watch that proves he was with her when he claimed to be in meetings. I will reclaim it all, bite by bite, until he has nothing left but the consequences of his actions. I review it one last time. Phase 1, the source code. Release my original time-stamped algorithm code to a consortium of tech journalists, proving I am the true architect of the Nexus AI. Phase 2, the investor fraud. Submit the evidence of data manipulation to the Securities and Exchange Commission via my lawyer's secure portal. Phase 3, the biometric betrayal. Anonymously leak the data logs showing his elevated heart rate and location at the waterfront condo he secretly bought for Nina. I have memorized every single piece of this evidence. I have reread these documents so many times the data is burned into my memory. But I can't keep the master file on any of my devices. It's too risky. He has backdoors to everything he owns, which is everything in this house. I have no intention of leaving a single digital footprint that leads back to me. So, the original file has to be wiped. At 8:15, a soft chime from my phone announces a calendar event. Call with mom. Isabel, your mother is on the video line, the home's automated voice announces. I look at the screen. It's not my mother, it's Diana Sterling. The shark? My sister had texted earlier. That's her, I had replied. She sent back a single emoji, a lead bomb. Tear him limb from limb easy. I hold the phone, her words giving me strength. My sister speaks little, but she sees everything. She's watched Marcus gaslight me for months, a silent witness to my slow erasure. She knows I'm not crazy. Thank you, I texted back. Don't even think about looking back. A true smile almost reaches my face. I'm not planning on it. The video call interface is crisp and professional. I tap the screen, and Diana Sterling's face appears. She's in her 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that miss nothing. She is the one lawyer in the tech world that founders and VCs are terrified of. She took my case because she smelled a legendary corporate implosion. She didn't just believe I was sane, she knew I was a ticking time bomb. Diana, tomorrow, 10 a.m., I state clearly. The servers are ready, she replies, her voice calm and lethal. Everything is in place. The SEC filing is queued. My forensics team has authenticated every byte of your source code. The moment they try to challenge your claim, we drown them in proof. I close my eyes picturing it. Marcus, on stage in Tokyo, under the bright lights with a 360-degree screen behind him. A stage design I sketched for him on a napkin. He'll be charming the audience, painting a future that has completely written me out of its creation myth. And then his PR lead, Nina, will get a notification on her phone. Then another and another. A top-tier tech journal has just published my original code. The SEC has announced an investigation. All company assets, including his personal accounts, are frozen. He won't have any idea what hit him. His narcissism won't let him see it coming, I say. Narcissism is a pre-existing condition for failure, Diana responds. We have 10 minutes. Walk me through the data transfer protocol one last time. I do. I outline the entire process, the secure European servers, the dead man's switch I've coded that will auto-send the files and then erase itself. Diana just listens, her expression unmoving. She asks 3 sharp questions. I answer them without hesitation. When the on-screen timer shows 1 minute left, she says, "Get some rest, Isabel. Tomorrow we expose a fraud." "I've been living with the fraud for a year," I reply. "Tomorrow is just the press release." I end the call before she can say anything else. Back at my desk, I initiate the secure transfer. My sister sends another text, just a heart emoji, a silent guard watching over me from a distance. "Are you ready?" she had asked. "More than," I breathed to myself. "Let's do this." I sit on the floor and start the transfer. The thin progress bar crawls across the screen. Months of proof, of suppressed rage, of meticulously built revenge, all uploading into a digital cloud, ready to rain down fire. I wait until the progress bar completes its final crawl across the screen. The laptop now glows with the factory reset menu. A clean slate, wiped clean. The wellness attendant, a young woman named Sasha, turns from the doorway. "Feeling less cluttered?" she asks. "Much," I reply, and it's the truest thing I've said in months. It's all stored up here now. I tap my temple. Every line of proprietary code, every private server password, every single damning piece of the strategy. I never needed a hard drive. I just needed the focus that organizing it gave me. That night, I lie awake, staring at the ceiling. This retreat is always clinically quiet. The rubber-soled shoes of the night staff, the faint hum of the air purifiers. But tonight it feels like the dead calm before an earthquake. Tomorrow I check out. Tomorrow Marcus Thorne will learn the real price of betraying the woman who built his empire. He thought this place would break me. He pictured me returning as a docile, medicated doll, grateful for his supposed generosity. He was certain he had already won. He was spectacularly mistaken. I close my eyes and his face materializes in my mind. My husband, the man who stole my algorithm, my company, and my future. The man who swore he cherished me even as he engineered my complete ruin. He has no idea about the storm that's about to obliterate his world, but he will. But before you see me take back everything he stole, you need to understand how it all shattered. You need to know that I was the ghost in his machine, the true architect of his entire tech fortune. How I became one of the most promising software engineers in the valley. How I loved my husband and how he forged that love into a weapon to use against me. 7 years ago, I was on top of the world. My name is Isla Hayes, and I'm a coder. Or I was. I graduated from Stanford in 2015 with a doctorate and a dissertation on predictive AI modeling that got me offers from every major tech firm on the planet. I said no to all of them. I wanted to build something new from the ground up right here in San Francisco. Marcus missed my dissertation defense. He was supposedly in a meeting locking down seed funding. He sent a massive arrangement of orchids. Later that evening, he phoned me from a noisy steakhouse, the sound of laughter and clinking forks in the background. You know, it's a real problem that you're this brilliant babe, he slurred slightly. If you were just a little less intense, you'd be the perfect wife. I was 26 years old. I had just earned the highest distinction from one of the world's most competitive programs. And my boyfriend's first instinct was to call my intellect a flaw. I didn't get my heart broken, I got a new objective. I decided I would create a tech legacy so massive that he would have no choice but to respect me. We launched Nexus Innovations together in the fall of 2016. We started in a cramped office in Soma with a view of a brick wall. He was the charismatic CEO, the face of the company. I was the chief technology officer, the one who actually built the product. My server room was my sanctuary with its cool, conditioned air, the constant low hum of the fans, and the glow of monitor screens on my face. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I had a state-of-the-art rig, a deep understanding of machine learning, and a drive to create something revolutionary. My first huge success was developing a custom logistics algorithm for a major shipping company that everyone else said was impossible. I poured my life into it, working for 72 hours straight, fueled by coffee and cold pizza. When we landed the seven-figure contract, Marcus lifted me off the ground and spun me around. He swore my mind was the most incredible thing he had ever encountered. That one contract put Nexus Innovations on the Silicon Valley map. By 2018, we were in a sprawling headquarters downtown with a staff of 50 and a list of venture capitalists eager to invest. We had a booming valuation, a growing market share, and I had a diamond on my ring finger. Marcus Thorne was 10 years my senior, a handsome entrepreneur with an MBA, and a history of flashy but failed startups. When we first met, he called me his secret weapon. 2 years after we married, right after the pregnancy test showed a faint pink plus sign, he asked me to think about stepping back from the day-to-day operations. I should have seen it for what it was, but he was my husband and my doctor was concerned about the stress of my high-risk pregnancy. Marcus packaged it as pure, tender concern. He said it was for our baby, for the family we were building. He just wanted to protect me from the pressure. So I gave in. I hired a new chief operating officer, a woman named Nina, in the fall of 2019. I gave her my corner office with a city view, access to my development team, and oversight of our three biggest projects. Within 6 months, I knew I'd made a catastrophic error. She alienated my lead engineer with her corporate jargon. She botched a crucial software integration, costing us a key client. She passed on acquiring a brilliant little startup I'd been watching for years, then blamed the market downturn when our growth slowed. I found myself fixing her mistakes from my home office more than I was resting. But I could never pull the trigger and fire her. Each time I brought it up, I could hear Marcus's voice in my head. You need to let go, Ayla. Our family has to be the priority. Our monthly dinners at his parents' Atherton mansion became a chore. His mother would serve expensive wine, and his father, a retired venture capitalist, would hold court by the fireplace. Marcus was always at his side, absorbing the praise for Nexus's latest valuation, while I sat there, my growing belly the main topic of polite inquiry. My head of engineering, Leo, my closest friend, would sometimes join us, his expression showing a worry I didn't yet understand. I went out of a sense of duty, but the acceptance I once felt in that house had evaporated. One evening in the spring of 2020, I was looking for the powder room and passed his father's study. The heavy oak door was slightly ajar. I heard their voices. Marcus needs to be the sole voice of this company, his father said, his tone final. He's the visionary, that's what the market understands. She built the entire platform from nothing. Richard, his mother countered, her voice gentle but firm. She got lucky with a clever algorithm, his father scoffed. Marcus has the ambition. He just needs a wife who is an asset, not a rival. I stood motionless in the hall, my palm pressed against the cold wallpaper, feeling something essential fracture within me. I didn't say a word. I just went back to the dinner table, claimed I had a migraine, and we drove back to San Francisco in a heavy silence. I never told Marcus what I heard, but I started quietly reviewing our company's code commits and internal documents from home. Then, in March of 2021, a major tech journal published a feature on the industry's top innovators. The headline was The Architect of AI, Isla Hayes, and the Nexus Revolution. Inside was a dramatic full page photo of me in the server room surrounded by the machines that ran my code. The article called my work singularly brilliant and named me one of the most important minds in modern technology. I brought the magazine to dinner that weekend. Marcus was already on his second glass of whiskey. He glanced at the cover, his eyes flicking over the headline before placing it face down on an end table. But I saw the muscle jump in his jaw, the way his knuckles turned white around his glass. He never offered a single word of congratulations. He never brought it up again. That fall, I was given the Pioneer Prize for Technological Innovation. The ceremony was a formal gala at San Francisco's City Hall in October. Marcus's mother insisted on buying me a designer dress for the occasion. Even Leo rented a tuxedo. Marcus showed up, of course, playing the part of the proud husband. His father had a last-minute conflict and couldn't make it. I won. When my name was called, a shock went through my body. I walked to the stage, accepted the heavy etched glass trophy, and gave a brief speech thanking my team, my mentors, and my family. My eyes scanned the grand hall and found Marcus at our table. He was on his feet applauding like everyone else, but the smile was a mask. Later that night, as we waited for our car at the Valley stand, I watched my family gather their coats. His mother hugged me, telling me through tears how proud she was. Leo gripped my arm and whispered, "This is all you, Ayla, don't ever forget that." And Marcus, he approached me last. He blocked my path, his gaze falling to the award in my hands. "Enjoy it," he said, his voice a low murmur. "That spotlight gets hot. It can burn you." I didn't recognize the threat for what it was then, but I should have. Because that night was when my husband started plotting to erase me. The first real proof landed on November the 5th, 2023, at 3:22 in the morning. That one tiny discovery was the thread that unraveled his entire lie. It was just a hidden folder on a server. I was in our home office overlooking the bay, the city lights shimmering on the water. Sleep had abandoned me, my thoughts a constant loop about the baby, who was just weeks from arriving. I was 7 months pregnant, propped up in my chair, unable to get comfortable. Marcus was away, a conference. I had logged into our company's primary cloud server with my admin credentials, wanting to review a piece of my original code. That's when I saw it, an encrypted directory under his user ID I had never seen before. A flicker of unease turned into cold dread. I opened it, and there it was, his entire betrayal laid bare. It wasn't just the affair with Nina, detailed in messages and photos. It was the business plan. A new corporate structure, legal documents to transfer all of Nexus's intellectual property, and a strategy to dilute my founder's shares to nothing. He was going to steal my company, my life's work, and give my job to his mistress, all while I was on maternity leave. The notification on the screen was a quiet one, but it was the sound of my world ending. No other context, just those 7 words on the notification. I felt the baby kick, a sharp jab under my ribs as a cold dread washed over me. The primary user was Marcus. We had a new beta version of our company's wearable, the Aura Band, which synced biodata between partners. He said it would give me peace of mind to see his vitals while he was traveling so much. Our whole life was built on data. What kind of spike? I whispered to the empty room. I tried calling Marcus, but it went to his voicemail. He was supposedly at an all-day off-site with the board in San Jose. I grabbed my laptop from the kitchen island, my car keys, and I drove to our downtown Seattle office, my pulse throbbing in my ears. I reached the Nexus Tower at 3:30 in the afternoon. The building was a sleek monolith of steel and glass, a monument to our shared dream. A few programmers were milling around the lobby looking tired. I used my co founder's keycard and took the express elevator to the executive floor. His assistant, a professional and kind woman I'd hired myself, was waiting for me. I had called her from the car. Isabel, she said, her face troubled. There might be a problem. Where is Marcus's presentation for the board? He sent it over this morning, said he was going to be tied up all day. That made me pause. Marcus never sent files. He always presented live from his own device. Show me, I said. We went to her desk. The ride up in the silent high-speed elevator had felt like an eternity. When we got to her terminal, I saw it. A data log. Someone had been accessing the company's most sensitive R&D files from an off-site, non-secure IP address. What's going on? Marcus asked, walking out of his private office. His face was a mask of relaxed surprise. What do you mean, what's going on? I thought you were in San Jose. He gestured vaguely. The offsite ended early. I was just pulling up your Aura data on my laptop, my fingers trembling as I navigated the app he had so lovingly designed for me. He was lying. The Aura app showed his location data, placing him at a residential high-rise in Belltown, where he had been for the past 4 hours. The IP address accessing the R&D files was from the same building. It wasn't a hack. I didn't authorize this data transfer, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He glanced at the screen. I found a weakness in our cloud security. I was moving the files to a more secure server. We just avoided a major corporate espionage attempt. My blood turned to ice. You what? You moved our most valuable intellectual property off the corporate network without telling me? It was an emergency measure, he said, his tone infuriatingly reasonable. Our work is safe now. You can't just move our core asset without board approval. My voice cracked, sharp and loud in the quiet office. His assistant stared at her keyboard, trying to disappear. This is my code to Marcus, my life's work. If our competitors get this, they won't, he said smoothly. You don't know that. Isabel was giving an interview to a lifestyle blogger near the grand piano. My husband Julian was pacing by the balcony doors, his jaw tight, as he spoke into his phone, clearly trying to manage the fallout with his investors. My design team stood awkwardly by the caterer's table. A couple of my junior associates were on the verge of tears. I saw one of Julian's board members, a woman in a stark white blazer, give me a look of pure cutting disappointment before she turned her back. I thought about the absurd budget overruns. Julian's voice, on the phone earlier that day, sharp and dismissive. I thought about him pushing me to fast-track the special project for his new client, insisting we bypass our usual procurement process. 3 of his primary partners looked livid, but that wasn't one of their projects. Julian knew that. His CFO arrived at our Miami penthouse an hour after the last guest left. They spoke with me while I was trying to fight off a wave of pregnancy-induced nausea. I was lying down in our master bedroom when Mr. Peterson entered. He was a silver-haired man, with a ledger book in his hand and the cold, detached eyes of someone who only sees the bottom line. He didn't offer a greeting, just sat in the velvet armchair by the window and asked me to walk him through the invoices for the South Beach penthouse project. I explained everything. I told him about the sudden rush orders, about Julian handling the vendor approvals directly, about the strange last minute additions to the budget that I had flagged, about the payment authorizations Julian had insisted I sign to keep the project moving, about the moment during the party I overheard his partners talking about a $2 million haul, about my firm's name being whispered. Mr. Peterson documented every word. He nodded, his face unreadable. He asked a few pointed questions about material sourcing, then said, "Who signed off on the final wire transfer for the imported Italian marble?" I went still. Julian had brought me the form himself. I never checked the final vendor number. "But your firm is the sole contractor of record on this build, Mrs. Sterling," Peterson said flatly. "So someone from your office had to approve the final payment. That's corporate policy." "I know," I said, "but I was approving the standard materials. Julian must have changed the order." Peterson opened his leather satchel, pulled out a tablet, and set it on the bed. It showed a digital invoice and wire confirmation, a payment of $250,000 to a shell corporation I'd never heard of, for stone that never existed. At the bottom in the digital signature field was my name, authenticated with my unique company password. My approval? I could only stare at it. "Whose approval is this?" Peterson asked. "That's mine," I whispered, the room starting to spin. "But I never authorized a payment like that." Peterson's expression was like granite. "Mrs. Sterling, this transfer was logged from your office IP address 3 months ago. It has your digital signature. It has your employee tax ID. Are you suggesting you didn't approve it?" "I'm telling you," I said, my voice shaking. "I have never seen that invoice before in my life." He leaned away, his disbelief palpable. "Then how did your signature get on it?" I had no explanation. They remained in our home for another hour, the questions growing more pointed. The nausea had turned into a throbbing headache. 5 years of building my firm's impeccable reputation was evaporating. They suggested I see a doctor, but I refused. I had to get to my office. I had to find the original project proposals. I called Leo, my lead designer, from the privacy of my study. He picked up immediately. "Chloe, my God, what happened?" I heard the partners were furious. "Leo, I need a favor," I said, trying to keep my voice from breaking. "Go to the office right now, log into the main server. I need you to pull the original budget files for the South Beach project, the ones I drafted back in May." "Of course, I'm heading there now." "And Leo," I hesitated, "don't say anything to Julian about this." A tense silence stretched between us. "Chloe," Leo said, his tone soft with concern. "What's really happening?" "Just get the files." Leo called back 30 minutes later, his voice strained. "They're gone, Chloe." The breath left my lungs. "What are you talking about, gone?" "The original proposal folder isn't there. I checked the cloud backup. I even checked the physical server in the basement. It's been overwritten. All the initial drafts have been scrubbed." "That's not possible. We have redundant archives for everything." "Someone didn't just delete them," Leo said. "They used an algorithm to wipe them clean." I squeezed my eyes shut, my head pounding. "Leo, who has administrative access to overwrite archived files?" "Only 3 people. You, me, and Julian." "Of course." It was just after 2 in the afternoon when Miss Diaz from the State Licensing Board called, asking me to come to their downtown Miami office for a formal review. I told her I would be there in 30 minutes. No official complaint had been filed, not yet, but I could feel the net tightening. The office building was an imposing tower of chrome and tinted glass on Brickell Avenue. Miss Diaz met me in the lobby and led me down a sterile white hallway to a small conference room. It was as bleak as you'd imagine. A cheap laminate table, 3 chairs, and a one-way mirror on the wall. I knew someone was watching. Miss Diaz sat, placed a small digital recorder on the table, and informed me the conversation was on the record. I focused on taking slow, deep breaths. Telling myself the truth was on my side, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. She went over the same details Peterson had. I gave her the same truthful answers. Then her tone shifted. Mrs. Sterling, we have already received a preliminary statement from your husband, Julian Sterling. My heart hammered against my ribs. What could he have possibly told them? Miss Diaz glanced at her notes. He stated that he raised serious concerns about your firm's billing practices over 2 months ago. He claims he sent a formal letter to your office requesting a line item audit of the South Beach project. According to him, you told him you were too busy with other clients and that he should trust your process. The color drained from my face. That is an absolute lie. We have the letter, Mrs. Sterling, Miss Diaz said, her voice devoid of emotion. It's dated January 10th, sent via certified mail from Mr. Sterling's corporate office to yours. I never saw any letter. The delivery was signed for at your front desk, she countered. I stared at her, my thoughts a chaotic blur. He's lying. He must have fabricated it. Miss Diaz leaned forward. Mrs. Sterling, your firm is at the center of a $2 million billing discrepancy. We have invoices with your authenticated digital signature. We have a letter showing you were formally warned about potential overages, and we have a statement from your husband confirming you deliberately ignored his concerns. She paused, her eyes searching mine. Help me see the part of this that I'm not getting. I couldn't speak because the truth landed with the force of a physical impact. Julian wasn't just covering his tracks, he had planned this. He had forged my signature on inflated invoices. He had manipulated our shared project files. He had planted a fake letter to make me look negligent. He was framing me to cover the money he was stealing from his own company. And his plan was flawless. They suspended my business license at 3:15 that afternoon. Miss Diaz stood up. Chloe Sterling, your interior design license and your firm's business permit are suspended, effective immediately, pending a full forensic audit. She read the formal declaration as another official entered and served me with a thick envelope of legal notices. The paper felt like dry ice against my skin. I didn't protest, I didn't say a word. I sat in stunned silence as they escorted me from the room, down the long corridor, and back to the lobby. And that's when I saw him. A single reporter from a prominent financial gossip blog was standing just outside the main doors, his phone held up, recording. Someone had told him I'd be here. The moment I stepped into the sunlight, he called out, Chloe, is it true your firm spent $2 million designing Isabelle Monet's new penthouse? The name sliced through my shock. Isabelle Monet, the beautiful, coy woman Julian had introduced as a new friend a few months ago. And in that instant, I knew everything. He hadn't just had an affair, he had made me design their home, he had made me pay for it. And now he was making me take the fall for it. The microphone booms felt like they were inches from my face. All I could register was the blinding pulse of camera flashes and the shouting of reporters asking if I had any comment on the tragedy. My career was being dismantled, live on the 6 o'clock news. This was a public execution of my reputation. I imagined the board members, the city planners, the families who had put their trust in my designs. They would all be watching this. They would see my face and be convinced I was a fraud who cut corners. In the court of public opinion, the verdict was already in. An assistant bundled me into a black car, and I gave the driver the address of a hotel in the Gold Coast. I couldn't stand the idea of going back to the penthouse and facing Julian. On the quiet drive along the river, we passed the Sterling Tower, the skyscraper I'd poured my soul into. I looked up. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our apartment on the 70th floor, I saw him. Julian was on the balcony talking to Serena, his new head of acquisitions. He glanced down at the street, his gaze sweeping over the chaos, and for a heartbeat his eyes met mine. And he raised his glass. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture, a subtle, confident toast. But I saw it. That gesture was all the proof I needed. He had orchestrated this whole nightmare. The falsified material orders, the deleted server logs, the perfectly timed anonymous tip to the Safety Commission this morning, making sure I would be the one to take the fall. The ruined lives, my shattered career. He was the architect of it all, and I had been too blind to see his design. I assumed my colleagues would defend me. I assumed my parents would know my integrity. I assumed someone, anyone, would say, Claire would never approve that. I was wrong. The hotel suite reeked of lemon cleaner and loneliness. I'd been hiding out there for 5 days when my mother finally appeared. I was sitting in the hotel's cold lobby in a stark leather chair, gazing out at a city I no longer felt a part of. The space was all polished concrete and dark wood, and a track light above me emitted a faint, annoying buzz. A few other patrons spoke in hushed, polite tones. When my mother entered, a desperate wave of hope washed over me. I thought she was there to tell me she knew I was innocent, that she'd hired a real lawyer, that she'd confronted Julian and saw through his lies. I was wrong. She collapsed into the chair across from me, her face ashen and weary. Her eyes were swollen and bloodshot, and she seemed to have aged a decade. Claire, she started. I leaned forward, my pulse quickening with anticipation. Mom, oh thank God, I need your help. She raised a hand, silencing me. If you made a mistake, Claire, you have to own up to it. The breath caught in my throat. What? Julian explained the whole situation, she said, her voice dripping with a gentle pity that felt like poison. He told us about the immense pressure you've been under, the 18-hour days, and with the baby coming, he believes you were so exhausted you might have just signed off on the material change without realizing. It happens, honey. You were stretched too thin. You made a bad call. It felt like she had slapped me. Mom, I did not sign that approval. Julian faked my digital signature. He planted those documents. He set me up. She just let out a long, tired sigh. Claire, we're talking about Julian. He would never be capable of something like that. He was? Darling, I know you're terrified, but throwing these insane accusations at your own husband isn't going to help. You need to cooperate with the lawyers. You need to focus on how to fix this. I could only stare at her, my words gone. Mom, my entire professional life is over. Julian did this to me. He's having an affair with Serena, that woman from his firm. He did this to get rid of me. And you're asking me to accept the blame? Her own eyes started to well up with tears. I don't see what other choice you have. You could have faith in me, I whispered. She didn't. She left her car keys on the glass table, got up, and walked out of the lobby without a single glance back. 2 days later, my father showed up at the hotel, and he brought Julian with him. I should have seen it coming. My father sat opposite me while Julian stood near him, arms folded across his chest in a perfect imitation of a concerned husband. Claire, my father said, his tone like ice. No greeting, no warmth. Dad, it's all a lie. He paid me no mind. The Vance family name is being publicly humiliated. Our friends from the foundation are pulling their donations. The board at the Architectural Museum is asking for my resignation. A white-hot rage flared in my chest. My life is in ruins, and you're worried about your social calendar? I'm worried about our family's reputation, he shot back. Your grandfather worked for 50 years to build that name. You've managed to tear it down in less than a week. Then, help me fight to clear it. He just shook his head, his expression grim. Julian is going to take over management of the estate. He'll deal with the media. He will do everything necessary to contain this mess and salvage what's left of our good name. I looked from my father's cold face to Julian's. He was watching me with the same predatory stillness I'd seen from the balcony. You can't, I said, my voice trembling. I'm his wife. Half of that is mine. You're facing a federal investigation, my father said flatly. You are in no condition to be managing an asset portfolio of this magnitude. We have a prenuptial agreement. My personal assets are untouchable. You can't get to my shares. We aren't trying to get to them, Julian said, his voice disgustingly reasonable. We're simply asking that you sign over temporary power of attorney to me, only until this whole unfortunate business is behind us. I let out a sharp, ragged laugh. You must be out of your mind if you think for a single second I would ever give you control over anything. It stopped being your choice to control, my father said, the moment you brought this disgrace upon us. I shot out of my chair so quickly it almost fell backward. That evening, I called Mark Adler, the sharpest defense lawyer in Chicago, from the hotel's landline. It was the only card I had left that wasn't frozen. He picked up on the third ring. Claire! Mark, I need to retain you. A long, uncomfortable silence hung in the air. I'm unable to take your case. What? A court order was issued this afternoon, he explained. Julian's attorneys filed an emergency injunction. All your assets, your private accounts, the joint holdings, it's all been frozen. I can't represent you without payment. But you're my friend. You told me you would always have my back. I said I'd help you if I was able, Claire, but I'm a partner in a firm. I have a bottom line to think about. I'm sorry, he hung up the phone. I stood there in my own home, phone in hand, staring at an original sketch of the skyline on the wall. I had no power, no access to my own money, and no family on my side. I was completely cornered. The lawyer my father hired for me showed up the next day. His name was Ben Carter. He looked about 30, ran on a mixture of espresso and raw ambition, and wore a suit that probably cost more than my first apartment. We met in a glass-walled conference room at his firm. He dropped a single, thick manila folder on the mahogany table and took the seat opposite me. I'm handling 87 active files right now, he stated, so I won't waste your time, Mrs. Vance. My firm doesn't have the bandwidth for a drawn-out legal war. Your husband's team has an airtight case. The final material orders were submitted using your encrypted credentials. You are the signatory of record. 3 different engineering firms were suing for negligence. If this goes before a judge, you will be found liable. I never approved those materials, I insisted. And you can prove that how? I can't. The original server data was erased. In that case, our only move is to pursue a plea deal. A plea deal? I stared at him, stunned. I'm innocent. That is irrelevant, Carter said bluntly. What's relevant is what the court will believe. And right now, the court is going to believe you are guilty. He was gone in less than 20 minutes. He never even asked if I wanted a glass of water. My friend Jenna came to see me the next week. She came by herself, late one afternoon, as the city was coming alive for the evening. She sat across from me in my silent living room. Claire, she said, her voice soft. Now I understand. A frigid bitterness settled into my voice, pushing back the tears. Ben, I'm certain Julian set this all up, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I don't have the evidence to show how he covered his tracks yet, but I know he did it, and I'm going to help you prove it. How? I asked, a tiny flame of hope igniting. I'm not totally sure, but I will find a way. He cast a worried look toward the penthouse entrance, then leaned forward over the granite countertop. I just need you to keep up the act for a while longer. Can you manage that? I gave him a slow, measured nod. Yes, I can manage that. He gave my hand a quick squeeze, a gesture of solidarity, and then left. That night I sat on the chaise lounge in our massive bedroom looking out at the glittering lights of the Chicago skyline. I replayed my mother's words, her begging me not to rock the boat. I replayed my father's warning about the risk to our financial empire. I pictured Julian standing next to them at dinner last week, wearing that charismatic, deceitful grin. I pictured that woman, Serena, and the other life he was building with her, and I thought about the 18 years of my life I was supposed to sacrifice in this beautiful prison. I opened the secure accounting software I'd secretly installed on my laptop and started a new encrypted ledger. I named it Day One. My dream of a loyal family was dead. My faith in our perfect marriage was a ruin. I began to build my case. The foundation gala was on October 5th, 2023. It was the windiest night of the year. 4 hours. That was how long I had to remain by his side, smiling while he publicly celebrated my demise. But I logged every insincere laugh, every knowing look he exchanged with his cronies, and every single person who went along with the lie into my memory. I would make use of it all later. I suspected the pressure from his latest funding round was building a wall between us. And what did Leo say when I told him? He claimed Nexus AI needed his undivided attention. He called my concerns irrational, a product of pregnancy hormones. That was a lie. I could feel the lie settle in the air between us, heavy and cold. Julian was across the room watching us. He knew. Mr. Vance, your wife is a renowned architect, correct? That's right. So she is not typically involved in the strategic direction of your artificial intelligence company? No, but I can tell when my own wife is pulling away from me. And you never once suggested stepping back from this new project for the sake of your relationship? Leo waited, letting the question imply its own answer. I trusted Clara to communicate her needs. Julian just stared into his drink, powerless. My father was trapped by the catering station on his second whiskey. He looked frayed, a man worn down by expectations. He wouldn't meet my gaze. The reporter asked him about my childhood. Clara was always a perfectionist, he mumbled, the words thick with alcohol. She always needed to have the best designs, the highest marks. I suppose she felt she had to overachieve, coming from our modest background and marrying into Leo's world. Did her ambition ever worry you? At times, she could forget everything else. She would take on projects like that new museum wing that were all consuming. I told her the client was impossible. I warned her the deadlines were too tight. She paid no attention. Another lie. I noted its shape and texture. My mother intercepted me near the coat check as she was leaving. Her eyes were red, her smile brittle. The reporter had asked if she thought I was truly fulfilled. My mother glanced at me, her look a silent plea, her gloved hands twisting her clutch. I adore my daughter, she said, her voice barely a whisper. But a man of Leo's stature has certain expectations. A partnership is about balance. If Clara lost sight of her role in this marriage, she has to accept the consequences. I didn't flinch. I just held her stare. She was the one who broke contact. I filed that moment away. It would be useful later. Our wealth manager, Damien, caught me by the bar. He had our portfolio open on his tablet, a weapon disguised as the report. He testified that my spending on the new house had been extravagant, that I'd fought with Leo about the construction budget, and that Leo had instructed him to freeze my personal credit lines. I dissected each statement, separating the outright falsehoods from the twisted truths. Richard Sterling, our neighbor and the head of the Homeowners Association, gave a comment to a journalist on his way to the valet. He painted me as unreasonable during our landscaping approval process. He called me demanding and arrogant. I knew the truth. Leo had made a $50,000 donation to his university alumni fund, but I had no way to link the two events. Not yet. I observed his tells, the way he avoided looking at my face, the nervous way he kept straightening his tie. I would not forget. I finally had Leo to myself in the car service on the ride home. Julian had insisted I needed to present my side of the story. I told him the absolute truth. I knew about the girl, and I knew he'd been using our shared accounts to finance her life. The transaction histories had been professionally wiped. The lease on her condo was signed by a shell corporation. I was being systematically erased. Leo just watched the city lights blur past. Clara, if the bank records were altered, where are the originals? Gone. Who deleted them? You did, Leo. Can you prove that? No. Do you have any evidence whatsoever of my infidelity? The server logs at the bank were purged. The purge itself is the proof. Or, Leo replied, the stress and the hormones are making you paranoid. I said nothing. 7 months pregnant, standing in the kitchen of our new San Francisco home, I felt the familiar chill of dread. My husband, Leo, a man who could charm investors out of millions, was on a video call in his study. Then, his phone, synced to our family cloud, buzzed on the counter beside me. A photo memory notification. Kyoto, 1 year ago. I tapped it open before I could think. There he was, at a private dinner, arm around a woman I'd never seen. He was supposed to be in Tokyo closing a deal. It's the board, he called out from his office, his voice tight. Some market instability is nothing. That was the moment I knew. It was a single, careless digital ghost, but it planted a seed of doubt that began to poison the perfect life that I thought we were building. That poison took root. It was fed a week later by a receipt from a custom jeweler that was automatically saved to our shared drive. A diamond necklace and his initials subtly worked into the design. A gift I never saw from a purchase made the same day he was supposedly at an all night coding session in Silicon Valley. I sat in the new nursery surrounded by soft shades of gray and pale blue and felt our son kick. The hypocrisy was a physical pressure in my chest. I was growing our family while he was funding a different one. The suspicion was gone, replaced by the sharp, cold certainty of his betrayal. I didn't hire a lawyer. I opened my laptop. An encrypted chat window appeared on a Monday. Inside was a thread with a cybersecurity expert I knew from college. He walked me through recovering deleted server logs and tracking digital financial footprints. My husband's other life was laid bare in lines of code. His money wrapped around a woman 10 years younger than me. She was a lifestyle influencer, naturally, and on the business registration for her media company was my husband's name listed as a primary investor. The world didn't shatter, it just rearranged itself into a new, terrifying landscape. My mother wept when I told her, pleading with me not to cause a scene. My best friend Julian just sat with me in silence, his fury a quiet presence in the room, but I felt a strange sense of clarity, a chilling focus. He believed his money made him untouchable. I was about to teach him the meaning of leverage. The first note in my journal was the date I opened that chat window. By day 100, my grief had hardened into a plan. The business ethics and corporate law databases became my new home. On day one, I didn't plan, I fell apart. I lay on our oversized bed, staring at the ceiling, and cried until I felt hollowed out. Julian, my oldest friend, didn't offer advice. He just closed the blinds and let me break in the darkness. I thought about our son, about the promises we made, about the guests at our wedding who called us a power couple. I cried until there was nothing left inside but the empty space where my trust used to be. On day 30, my mother called again, telling me that successful marriages require compromise. I looked at my phone for a long time after we hung up. Then I deleted her contact information. Julian watched me from the kitchen island. He said nothing. He got it. On day 100, Julian asked me what I was going to do. We were on the balcony as the sun set, the lights of the Golden Gate Bridge beginning to glitter in the distance. I told him about all of it. The business trips that were romantic getaways, the hidden investment accounts, the diamond necklace, the media company. He listened, his jaw tight. When I was done, he said, "He expects you to fall apart." "I know," I said. "Are you going to let him be right?" I didn't have an answer. I had her name, Sloane, but he had the reputation, the legal team, the network. I was just Clara Vance, a pregnant architect in a glass house, serving a sentence I hadn't earned. On day 150, Julian said, "You need a weapon." "What weapon?" I asked. "I'm 7 months pregnant. I have nothing." "So you find one." He said it so simply, but I had no idea where to even start looking. On day 200, I found it in Leo's home office. It was a sterile, glass-walled room I rarely entered, but tucked inside a collectible edition of an old sci-fi novel on his shelf, I found a slim, encrypted data key he must have forgotten. I copied the entire contents that night. 3 terabytes of data, Nexus AI's unaudited internal financials, Leo's personal crypto wallets, and the documents for shell corporations registered in the Cayman Islands. I spent weeks in the guest room, poring over the files on a new laptop, using only the screen's light so Leo wouldn't see anything from the hallway. I filled a legal pad with notes. I traced the wallet transactions, learned the names of the holding companies, and noted the exact dates he moved money. By the 4th month, I'd cross-referenced more than 200 documents. I understood his shadow operation better than he did. I could see how he siphoned company funds. I could see how he built her entire life. My aunt Genevieve was 60, with perfectly styled silver hair and a reputation as the most ruthless divorce attorney in San Francisco. She'd spent a decade in the district attorney's office prosecuting financial crimes. She knew something was wrong during a casual call about the baby. That afternoon, she met me for coffee at a place she knew would be empty. "You're going to burn him to the ground, aren't you?" she observed, her tone flat. "I am." She started sending me links and legal precedents: forensic accounting, corporate veil law, asset forfeiture. She never asked for a name. She'd just pour more wine and say, "Knowledge is the best revenge, my friend." On the 150th day of my shattered reality, I transferred a retainer to a private investigator Sasha had in her contacts. I told him I needed due diligence on a potential business partner. I emphasized the need for absolute discretion. I sent him the preliminary file on a Friday and tried to breathe normally. Julian never had a clue. On day 183, the investigator, a Mr. Finch, requested a face to face meeting. He found me in a quiet alcove of a hotel library, his face grim. "I've analyzed the preliminary materials," he said, his voice a low rumble, "and I've cross referenced the travel itineraries with land registry documents. What you suspect is just the tip of the iceberg." I felt the ground beneath me finally solidify. It was certainty, the kind of certainty that could either save you or destroy you completely. On day 200, a courier delivered a manila envelope to my mail service, marked Estate Survey Documents. Inside was Finch's full report. He had one simple question for me. Was I aware of the new construction on Lake Michigan? A sprawling modern home nestled in the woods, purchased 6 months ago through an LLC. It was a clean, direct inquiry. He was asking if I knew about their sanctuary. Every private jet Julian chartered for her, every reservation at a Michelin-starred restaurant, every ridiculously expensive bottle of wine, every single receipt became a brick in my fortress of vengeance. I saved everything on a micro drive I labeled Cookbook Edits. My documentation was meticulous, cross-referenced with dates and locations. I slipped the drive inside the spine of a vintage Julia Child cookbook on my kitchen shelf. 6 months in, my oldest friend Sasha, a shark of a divorce lawyer, came for dinner. She slid a small black hard drive across the table. It was a complete image of Julian's personal server, acquired by a source inside his firm's IT division. My travel history, my private emails, my signature on the prenuptial agreement he thought protected him, not the updated one his lawyers were quietly preparing. "This is enough to take him for half," Sasha murmured. "I don't want half," I told her. "I want him to have nothing, and I want this over before the baby comes." Sasha studied my face for a long moment. Then she said, "My retainer is paid. We serve him the night of the foundation gala." "Why then?" "Because you told me he was a charlatan on our second date, and I wouldn't listen. 4 months in, David, a junior architect at Julian's firm and a friend from college, sent me a dozen files. They were embedded in emails with subject lines about nursery furniture, architectural plans, receipts for custom furniture, wire transfers to her interior design company. Everything I needed to show Julian had embezzled over $5 million from the new tower project to build a secret life with Isabel. We had our own code. David called it auditing the project. I called it polishing my sword. 312 days in, Julian suggested a weekend trip to Napa. A baby moon, he called it. It was the first time in over a year he'd suggested going anywhere. Just the two of us. I agreed. I needed to look into his eyes. I needed to know if he could sense the abyss that was about to open up right under his custom-made shoes. I boarded the plane with a cold, hard stone of resolve sitting in my stomach. I arranged myself in the deep leather wingback chair, taking a sip of sparkling water. Julian walked in, wearing a cashmere sweater and a watch that cost more than my first car. He was exactly the same, effortlessly charming, radiating a success that made him seem untouchable. He sat across from me, the polished expanse of our mahogany desk, a vast empty space between us. "Amelia," he started. His voice was a carefully crafted instrument designed to soothe and disarm. "How have you been feeling?" Fine, I've just been so worried about you. I know this pregnancy has been hard, and with the pressure of the new tower, it's all been incredibly stressful. But once our son is here, all of this will fade away. You can get back to your writing. We can be a real family again. I just looked at him. He actually believed his own performance. He thought I would just forget, that I would fold and come back to him, grateful for the scraps of his attention. Of course, Julian, I said, my voice as smooth as glass. We'll be a family. He smiled, the same confident, predatory smile I'd seen in the candid photos of him with her. He was absolutely sure he had already won. On day 364, I sat in the half finished nursery and opened my laptop. I went through the files from the microdrive one last time. Every fraudulent invoice memorized, every illicit wire transfer, every lie. Then I scheduled the emails, attaching the dossiers to be sent to three people: my lawyer, the chairman of his board, and a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist at the Chicago Tribune. My cousin was downstairs, keeping Julian busy with talk of baby names, her loyalty, something I had secured long ago. The emails were timed for 9 p.m. the next night. 364 days of silent work ready to detonate. When the confirmation message appeared, I reformatted the laptop's hard drive and then dropped it from the balcony into the river below. Wiped clean, but never forgotten. Does it feel good to let it go? Sasha asked. Yes, you don't need the physical proof anymore. No? I tapped my temple. The archive is right here now. That night, I made the final pencil mark on the inside cover of my cookbook manuscript. 364. I traced the rows of tiny lines with my fingertip. Every single day of his betrayal accounted for. The next day would be 365. The next day, I would stop counting. The next day, I would begin again. Day 364. They came as a unified force. One final maneuver to neutralize me before I could act. I had turned down all his attempts at a serious talk for weeks. I agreed to this one for a very specific reason. The housekeeper buzzed up at 3 in the afternoon. Ma'am, your husband is here with your mother and Mr. Vance Sr. Sasha looked up from her notes. Are you sure you want to do this now? Absolutely. Do you want me to stay? No, I can handle this. I walked into our formal living room. The afternoon sun struggled to get through the floor to ceiling windows. I sat in my usual chair, poured myself a glass of water, and waited. They entered like a delegation. Julian came first, my husband in a perfectly tailored suit, his cufflinks worth more than a year of my old salary. His father followed, his posture as rigid and imposing as one of his skyscrapers. And trailing behind them was my own mother, Diana, her face already arranged into a mask of anxious sorrow. They arrayed themselves on the couch opposite me. Julian took the center, of course, with the others positioned like his royal guard. He picked up a glass of water from the tray. Amelia, he said, his voice a disgusting imitation of warmth. You look wonderful. I remained silent. We've been so worried about you, my mother chimed in, her voice trembling on cue. Her performance was impeccable, meant for an audience of one. It has been too long since we've had a real talk. I held her gaze. Just 3 weeks ago, she had told my sister that Julian was concerned my pregnancy was making me irrational and paranoid, that he was worried I might try to harm his reputation out of some hormonal delusion. Now she was playing the role of the concerned mother. Julian's father cleared his throat. Amelia, Vance Properties is at a delicate stage. We are finalizing the financing for the new tower, and our investors require stability. We must present a unified family front. What kind of front? I asked, my voice perfectly neutral. Julian leaned forward, placing his hands on his knees. We need you to sign a temporary power of attorney. It's just a formality, of course. Just until the baby is born and you're feeling less overwhelmed. Once you're settled, we can tear it up. A dry, bitter laugh almost escaped me. Sign over my autonomy, I repeated. It's about securing the legacy, his father cut in. Vance Properties has defined this family in Chicago for 2 generations. Your father-in-law founded it. I helped you modernize it. You and Julian were meant to be its future. We cannot allow your condition to threaten that. My mother started to blot her eyes with a tissue. Amelia, please, for the family. Think of the name we have all worked so hard to build. The name I helped save. I corrected him, my voice dangerously quiet. Julian's smile faltered. We all built it, Amelia, as a family. His father nodded curtly. It's time to put this unpleasantness behind us. Let go of these fantasies. Just sign the document and we can all get back to normal. I looked at each of them. My father in law, who told investors I was emotionally fragile. 256 days of knowing what he did. And you seriously think I'm just going to sign it all away? Julian stared, his confident smirk melting into confusion. You don't have another option. Oh, but I do. Eleanor. My father in law's voice was a low growl. You're tearing this family apart over a petty jealousy. No, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I'm reclaiming what was built with my money. I rose from the leather sofa, my hands steady. This meeting is over. I walked towards the door of the penthouse. Julian shot to his feet. Eleanor, don't you dare walk away. I didn't look back. His mother was sobbing my name. His father was yelling something I didn't care to hear. I heard the sickening crack of Julian's fist, hitting the marble countertop. I didn't even flinch. I heard Marcus say something quietly to him, the words too muffled to make out, but I knew the intent. It was a final, courteous checkmate, confirming for my benefit that the next move was mine. I went back to the master bedroom. Sophia was waiting. How did it go? She asked, her voice soft. Exactly as planned, I replied. She gave a small, determined smile. So, the award ceremony is tonight. Yes. Are you ready? I glanced at the wall, at the 256 tally marks I'd made on the calendar hidden behind the painting. I've been ready for 8 months, I said. I didn't get a wink of sleep that night. I just lay there looking at the city lights, rehearsing every single moment of the evening to come. Tonight, the caterers would be serving champagne and canapes. Tonight, I would walk out of this luxurious prison a free woman. Tonight, Julian would discover what a public humiliation truly felt like. Tonight, they would all find out that you never ever underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose but the child she carries. The doors to the grand ballroom of the Art Institute of Chicago swung open at 7:23 in the evening on a Saturday. 7:23 by p.m. The doors opened. I walked in with a small clutch and 8 months of meticulously planned revenge. A black town car was waiting by the main entrance. Marcus Thorne had arrived on time. At 7 o'clock that evening, I took one last look around the penthouse suite. Sophia stood by the door. You have everything? She asked. Everything that matters. You've memorized the sequence? She pressed. I gave a single sharp nod. Go get him, Eleanor. Go burn his perfect world to the ground. I offered her a faint, appreciative smile. Nothing more needed to be said. We both understood that the only thing left was execution. The event coordinator met me at 7:15. He checked my name off the list and gestured toward the red carpet. I stepped out of the bland elevator and into the outfit Marcus had arranged. A stunning crimson silk gown, a diamond necklace that had been my grandmother's, and heels that made me feel powerful. At 7:20 they opened the doors to the main hall, and that's when I saw it all. The media, a sea of news crews, a swarm of photographers with flashing cameras, a full-blown red carpet affair. And his family. His father stood near the entrance. His mother was beside him, clutching a glass of champagne. Chloe was there in a sleek black dress, her expression a careful mix of admiration and ambition. And Julian, in a custom tuxedo, working the crowd, crafting the perfect image of a loving husband about to receive the city's highest architectural honor. He had orchestrated the entire spectacle. It was a picture-perfect moment for the press. The celebrated architect and his beautiful, pregnant wife, the very image of power and devotion, a narrative of genius and dynasty. I had to clench my jaw to keep from smiling. Marcus stood near the bar, an anonymous face in the crowd, completely apart from the scene. He didn't look my way. That was the plan. He simply observed, his expression unreadable. The master of ceremonies began his introduction. A wave of camera flashes exploded from the media pit. Julian stepped onto the stage, his arms wide, a single white rose in his hand. Eleanor, he called out, his voice booming through the speakers for every journalist to capture. My incredible wife. I walked directly toward the exit. I didn't slow my pace. I didn't meet his eyes. And I certainly didn't stop for the rose. I heard a few confused gasps from the audience as he stood there frozen. A wave of whispers spread through the room. Julian rushed to catch up to me. Eleanor. I kept walking. His flawless smile began to crack. He tried to get in front of me, to cut me off. Eleanor, he begged, what are you doing? I finally paused and met his gaze. For 8 long months, I had imagined this very second. I had prepared 1,000 vicious takedowns, 1,000 soul crushing truths. But in that moment, I offered him only silence. I simply held his stare. Then I deliberately stepped around him and continued toward the door. The Blacktown car pulled up to the curb. Marcus got out of the driver's seat and held the back door open for me. He pitched his voice just loud enough for the nearest reporters to hear. Your car is here, Mrs. Vance. I slipped onto the plush leather interior. The door shut with a solid, definitive thud. The noise, the confused shouts from journalists, Julian calling my name, the storm of camera clicks, it all vanished. Through the tinted window, I observed the beautiful chaos I had created. The reporters were now swarming my bewildered husband. The single white rose lay on the polished marble floor at his feet, already being trampled. Julian just watched the live news feed on his phone. His face a mask of pure rage. Marcus got into the driver's seat and pulled away from the curb without a word. We didn't speak for the first 10 minutes. I just watched the city lights blur past. The view changed from the grand museums of the South Loop to the glittering high rises along the Chicago River, and finally to the iconic skyline of the Gold Coast against the dark water of the lake. Marcus adjusted the rearview mirror. The hotel is ready. Attorney Sterling is waiting. Take the long way, I said. I want a good look at my city. Marcus nodded and turned onto Lakeshore Drive, heading north. We drove through the heart of the magnificent mile, past glittering storefronts and historic towers, past the projects that were born from our joint vision, the gallery on Michigan Avenue, the condo development in Lincoln Park. They were all still standing, our creations, our shared history. And then we drove past Oak Street and I saw it. The Peninsula, 22nd floor, a grand suite overlooking the lake. It was all set. Stop here, I told him. Marcus pulled the car over. I stepped out onto the sidewalk and just looked up at the hotel. This was where he had betrayed me. This was where he had entertained her. This was where he had spent our money. Julian had drained our joint accounts for her. He used a series of corporate accounts to hide the lavish gifts. He blamed market volatility for the losses. He thought he had gotten away with it completely. But that was all ending. Tonight, I whispered, the whole world finds out the truth. Marcus came to stand beside me. How long until Julian's accounts are frozen by the court order? I turned to look at him. What time is it now? 8:15. He's scheduled to give his acceptance speech at 9 o'clock. I told Marcus the bank will execute the asset freeze the second he steps on stage to accept the award. Marcus's eyebrow shot up. You're timing it for the peak of his live acceptance speech. No. A real smile finally touched my lips. The first one I'd felt in 8 months. I timed it so he'll be on live television in front of the entire Chicago elite when his firm's CFO calls to tell him his personal and business assets are completely locked down. Marcus was silent for a moment, then let out a slow breath. You are absolutely terrifying. Good. We returned to the town car. Marcus turned onto a side street, heading toward the hotel entrance. Phase 1 is complete, I said. Marcus nodded. Attorney Sterling has the forensic reports finalized. I've drafted the divorce filing. The moment we are in the suite, she files it electronically. How long for the court system to process it? 3 hours, maybe 4. The asset freeze will be in full effect by 9 p.m. Perfect. We drove the last few blocks in silence. Then Marcus asked, Eleanor, are you absolutely sure? Once she files, it's public record. There's no undoing it. Julian will know. Both your families will know. This will be a war. I looked out the window. The dark waters of Lake Michigan stretched out to the horizon. The skyline that I had helped him build glittered before me. It's already a war, I said. I'm just the one finally firing back. The suite was on the 22nd floor of the peninsula, a command center with a panoramic view of the city. Phase 1 was done. By the end of the night, Julian would lose the only thing he cared about more than his career, his perfect public image. I stood in the suite's enormous marble bathroom for a full 5 minutes before I even touched the faucet. 8 months. I hadn't felt secure in my own home for 8 months. I'd been living in a beautiful cage with a man I loathed, every single day a performance. Now I stood before a walk in steam shower and heated floors. The water was hot. The towels were thick and soft. I shut my eyes, letting the steam fill my lungs. For a single minute, I allowed myself to feel it all: the heartbreak, the fury, the crushing weight of 257 days of deception. Then I stepped out, dried off, and slipped on the robe. It was time to work. The command center was the suite's main parlor, furnished with a long glass desk, 3 open laptops, and stacks of legal documents. Marcus was already typing away. A woman I didn't recognize stood by the window, holding a phone to her ear. She ended her call as I came in. She was perhaps 60, with sharp, intelligent eyes and the unshakable confidence of someone who never loses. She wore an impeccable gray suit and an assessing gaze. "Eleanor Vance," she said, her voice crisp and clear. "I'm Victoria Hayes, the woman Chicago's elite call when their 9-figure marriages implode." She extended a perfectly manicured hand. "Time to get back to the fight. Let's reduce his world to ashes." I shook it. "It's a pleasure." Her associate Ben looked up. "Chloe, I've drafted the petitions, a complete freeze on all personal and business accounts linked to Damien Vance. An emergency order to prevent any assets from being moved overseas. We're set." "Perfect." I took a chair at the vast mahogany table. "Show me the audit." Ben slid a heavy binder across the polished wood. 112 pages. Architectural blueprints, LLC filings, encrypted emails, wire transfer authorizations, everything my private investigator had unearthed in 6 painstaking months. I started to flip through it. About 20 minutes later, I stopped. "Ben, this wire transfer to the Skyloft Holdings entity, the one for the penthouse build-out. What about it? The official bank statement shows it was processed on August 5th, but the project expense log has it dated August 28th. Ben leaned in, frowning. "A simple data entry mistake?" "No." I opened the corresponding file on my tablet. "It's not a mistake. Someone altered the expense log. Damien laundered the money, then created a backdated entry weeks later to disguise it as a legitimate project overage." Victoria peered over my shoulder. "That's bank fraud. That's investor fraud. That's enough for a very long stay in a federal facility." She looked at Ben. "Can you prove it?" "It's possible, but it would require getting into the primary server." "How long would that take?" "A week, maybe more. We don't have a week." I picked up my phone and dialed Leo. He answered on the first ring. "Chloe?" "Leo, I need a massive favor. Pull the raw server archives from Vance Development's project platform, August of 2023. I need the precise creation timestamp for any expense log related to Skyloft Holdings." "What's this about?" "It's about him faking a corporate financial document, and I need absolute proof in the next half hour." There was a pause on the line. Then he said, "Give me 15 minutes. At 2:15 p.m., Leo called me back. I have it." The log was created on August 29th, one day after you announced your pregnancy on social media. He backdated it to hide the $5 million he was funneling to her. I closed my eyes, a wave of nausea washing over me. "Send that to Victoria now." Ben's laptop pinged. He opened the file, his eyes widening as he read. He looked at me, completely astonished. "This is it. If we present this to the judge as evidence, he won't even blink." "Excellent." I checked my watch. "What time is Damien's speech at the convention?" 3 p.m. He's unveiling his new billion-dollar Phoenix Tower project to the National Realtors Association. I allowed myself a grim smile. File the petitions at 2:45. I want his capital investment accounts frozen on live television. Ben stared at me. Chloe, that's brutal. I know, I said. He lied to my face for the entire pregnancy while he was building a secret penthouse for his interior designer. I want 100,000 people to watch his empire crumble. Victoria let out a low laugh. I knew I liked you. Ben gave a slow, deliberate nod. 2:45 it is. At 2:45 p.m., Ben electronically submitted the three emergency petitions. Freeze all assets and trading accounts under Damien Vance's name. Injunction against any and all fund transfers. A mandatory asset injunction by a court-appointed administrator. At 1:48 p.m., Clara phoned Judge Harrison. Evelyn, it's Clara Blackwood. I'm cashing in that chip from the gallery fundraiser. She took a breath. I need an emergency order to halt a major transaction. Immediately. A bit of silence. My gratitude. She ended the call. He'll execute it in under 5 minutes. At 1:50 p.m., the signed judicial order was dispatched. The steel supplier's bank received a stop payment notification. At 2 p.m., we tuned the 80-inch screen in the penthouse to the Architecture Today live stream. Damien was on camera in a sharp charcoal suit, exuding confidence. The renowned host sat opposite him. The graphic behind them announced, Damien Blackwood unveils the Citadel Tower. Damien leaned toward the microphone. We are thrilled to embark on this next chapter. Together we will reshape the Chicago skyline. The host beamed. To launch this monumental project, you're finalizing the primary material purchase live for our audience. Damien chuckled, giving a thumbs up to his team off screen. He then pulled out the firm's titanium credit card to authorize the initial payment for the structural steel. He passed it to an assistant. The assistant swiped it. Her smile wavered. She swiped it a second time. At 2:03 p.m., she approached and whispered into Damien's ear. His polished smile evaporated. He snatched the card from her. He tried it himself on a nearby tablet. Declined. He tried again. Declined. A third time. Declined. A nervous murmur spread through the studio crew. The host, sensing disaster, scrambled to pivot. Damien's phone started buzzing on the glass table. He grabbed it. His face went ashen. On the live feed, his mouth clearly formed the silent question, "What is happening?" I shut my laptop. "Stage 1 is a success," I announced. My brother Marcus exhaled slowly. Lord have mercy. Clara lifted her glass of sparkling water. To justice. That evening, I stood at the penthouse window, gazing across the city. Chicago's skyline was an ocean of glittering diamonds. The lake was a vast expanse of dark silk below. Marcus came to stand beside me. "What's the plan now?" "Stage 2. First thing tomorrow, an exclusive story breaks on Design Deconstructed. It will detail precisely how Damien stole the core concepts for his last two projects from a junior designer's portfolio. The full uncredited design drafts will be leaked to the publication at the same time. And Stage 3? A tight smile played on my lips. Catherine finds out about Isabel. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. Damien's lead investor's wife. Exactly. I have the hotel bookings from the business trips, the receipts from the jewelry store, the saved text messages. Catherine's family provided the seed money for his entire firm. She's going to bring down the thunder. And when she does, she'll force a shareholder vote and deliver us the keys to his entire empire. You've thought of every detail. I had a year to think. Damien's phone rang 47 times before the sun came up. By 9 a.m., the Design Deconstructed homepage blared the headline, "Plagiarism and Betrayal Allegations Rock Blackwood Architecture." Alex Jensen had waited a year to reclaim his stolen work. Damien woke up at 6:30 in the morning to 47 missed calls. I knew because Marcus had a source inside his telecom provider the moment the article dropped. 47 calls. Investors, board members, the ethics committee, his lawyer, journalists. Damien sat up in his $1,000 bedsheets and clicked the first link his frantic assistant had messaged him. Leaked design drafts, 74 pages of them, Expert analysis confirming his digital signature on files that were nearly identical to Alex's originals. Digital forensics showing he'd siphoned over $2 million into a private account over 2 years. By 7 a.m., I was standing in our bedroom doorway holding my tablet. Did you steal those concepts? I asked, my voice chillingly steady. Damien looked up from his own screen. It's not that simple, Clara. Did you steal them? Clara, if you just let me handle this. Answer me. He said nothing. I turned and walked away. At 8 a.m., the blog ran the story as their top feature. A side by side comparison of Damien's celebrated buildings against Alex's original, dated concepts. A quote from an anonymous insider. The manipulated blueprints were used to secure contracts and defraud investors. This was not an oversight. It was a calculated, systematic theft of intellectual property. By 8:30, every major design and business outlet was covering it. At 9 a.m., Alex Jensen held his press conference. I watched the stream from the penthouse. Marcus sat beside me, his own laptop glowing. Alex stood at a podium in his attorney's office in the Loop. He wore a modest dark suit. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice was unwavering. A crowd of reporters crammed the space, their cameras flashing. My name is Alex Jensen, he started, his voice firm. I was a junior designer at Blackwood Architecture. I was there on June 15th, 2024. I know what he took. He took a deliberate breath, staring straight into the camera. I saw Mr. Blackwood in his office late that night. He instructed me to merge my project files with his. He claimed it was for a collaborative pitch. I told him the concepts were my own. He told me to be a team player or I wouldn't be on the team. He said, "Don't tell Clara." An article from Chicago Magazine's top architecture critic went live at sunrise. I should have recognized the pattern. I should have trusted my instincts. But Damien promised me our firm was a shared legacy. He swore our partnership was sacred. His voice, so smooth and reassuring in my memory, now echoed like a lie. But my creative vision was everything. The cantilevered balconies, the biophilic atrium, the interlocking facade. It was our shared language, and now he was speaking it with her, while that junior architect, Isabel, wore it around her neck on Instagram. I refused to let him rewrite our history. He was a thief. A cascade of notifications lit up my phone as the story exploded online. Damien ignored them, barricading himself in his home office, the thick oak doors a shield against the fallout. David, my lawyer, looked at me. The critic's piece was devastatingly effective. I nodded, my hand resting protectively on my pregnant belly. Are you all right? I am now. A lie that intimate can never stay buried. My phone vibrated again, a text from a loyal assistant at the firm. The leadership team is in an emergency session. They're trying to figure out a crisis response. Let them waste their time, I texted back. By 10 a.m., the Citadel project site was swarmed by local news vans. Reporters pushed against the security barriers. Private guards stood watch at the gate. Upstairs, in the main boardroom, Damien was unraveling. I wasn't there, but my source gave me a running account. 10:15 a.m. They are drafting a statement calling the article a smear campaign by a disgruntled ex-employee. 10:30 a.m. Damien is yelling, calling the critic a jealous has-been. 10:45 a.m. The PSAR advisors are divided. They want proof the designs are his before they issue a denial. His agent is dodging their calls. At 11 a.m., a student journalist with a phone confronted Damien in the firm's private garage. The footage went viral within minutes. Mr. Blackwood, are these your original designs? Damien's face was ashen. His jaw clenched. No comment. Did you steal from a junior colleague? No comment. Is your relationship with Isabel Vance a professional one? Damien shoved the phone out of his face and sped away in his sedan. By noon, 2 major corporate clients had publicly paused their contracts. Modern Architect magazine released a statement. We are formally retracting our Innovator of the Year award from Damien Blackwood, pending a review of these disturbing allegations. 3 prominent architects who had mentored him publicly condemned his actions. 2 universities rescinded their invitations for him to guest lecture. At 1 p.m., my own lawyer, David, held a press conference. He stood on the courthouse steps in a perfect suit, his expression grave. Effective immediately, I am filing for divorce on behalf of my client, Clara Blackwood, he declared. We have indisputable proof that Mr. Blackwood has committed professional fraud and intellectual property theft, building his career on a foundation of lies and deceit. I have full confidence that Mrs. Blackwood's artistic and financial contributions will be fully recognized. It was a masterclass in public relations. We had rehearsed it for a week. David was shaping a narrative, making it impossible for anyone to defend the man who betrayed his pregnant wife and his own junior staff. To the public, it looked like the first fatal crack in Damien's curated image. It was perfect. At 2 p.m., the Architecture Today organization released their own statement. The organization is aware of the grave allegations concerning Damien Blackwood. Integrity and originality are the bedrock of this profession. While we cannot weigh in on active legal matters, we are observing the situation with great concern. No further statements will be issued. Less than a week later, a devastating expose in the New York Times sent the final shockwave through Damien Blackwood's crumbling empire. By noon, the remaining investors were demanding an emergency vote. His name was toxic. His new Citadel Tower was a monument to his disgrace. He was an architectural titan watching his world implode. From my gallery office overlooking Millennium Park, I watched the afternoon light glint off the city's skyscrapers. My lawyer David stood beside me. The board is in chaos. Excellent. What is the endgame, Clara? He asked. Are you positive she'll vote with us? I am certain. My former mentor, Catherine, walked in with 2 cups of herbal tea. What gives you such confidence? A faint smile touched my lips, because at this very moment she's discovering that her star protege is a fraud in more ways than one. At exactly 2 p.m., a sleek, hand-delivered envelope arrived at Catherine Davenport's penthouse. The envelope contained just 2 high-resolution photographs and a single line of text. The first photo was of the interlocking facade on Damien's award-winning library. The second was a stolen photo of Alva, his stunning up-and-coming interior designer, from her private social media. On both of their wrists was the identical, custom-made platinum watch with a distinctive emerald face. The anonymous email below it simply said, "He told you it was a one-of-a-kind anniversary gift, didn't he?" At 4:10 p.m., my phone rang. It was Victoria. Her voice was pure steel. Every blogger in Chicago is about to know his name. But before I tell you who delivered the career-ending, soul-crushing evidence, the one person Damien believed was completely under his thumb, post a comment. Who do you think will ultimately be the one to tear him down? I want to see your guesses. A small disclaimer, this story is a fictional narrative intended to explore the intricate web of betrayal. If stories involving profound deception are triggering for you, now might be the time to move on. For the rest of you, let's proceed to the climax. Where should we meet? Victoria's voice was a coiled spring of controlled fury. The old saying is absolutely true. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Damien was about to understand that on a cellular level. I suggested a quiet, dimly lit bar in a Gold Coast hotel, the type with velvet booths and waiters who excelled at being invisible. Ben was already in a corner booth, a sleek black portfolio on the seat next to him. I got there at 8:30. A cold, relentless rain was falling, blurring the city lights through the tall windows. The bar was almost deserted. A pianist played a somber jazz tune. A few tourists were chatting quietly at the bar. I sat with Ben and ordered 2 mineral waters. Victoria arrived at 8:45. She wasn't emotional, she was far past that. Her eyes were dark with a calculated rage, and her composure was absolute. She wore a tailored black suit that seemed to command the very air around her. Her usual professional warmth was gone, replaced by the arctic calm of a general on the eve of battle. She sat opposite me, placing her briefcase on the table with a soft click. "You leaked the photos," she stated. It wasn't a question. "I did. How long were you aware something was wrong?" 8 weeks, I hired a digital forensics team. They tracked Ava's online life. Every picture was from a public event or shared social circle. Entirely admissible. Her knuckles were white where she gripped her phone. Why bring this to me? I leaned in, my voice low and steady. Because he used a network of shell companies to hide assets from my last client. And now he's using your family's money to ruin your life. We could be of immense value to each other. I would never trust a lawyer. You don't have to trust me, Chloe. You just have to despise him more than you distrust me. She was quiet, her gaze flickering between Ben and me. She hadn't touched her water. I loved him, she said, her voice a near whisper. When he pitched the Phoenix Tower project to my family's foundation, I believed every word he said. He showed me doctored revenue forecasts, fabricated letters of intent from investors. He told me you were trying to poach his clients. He said you were obsessed with his success, and you went along with it. He was the father of my child. Her voice was sharp. I was pregnant. I wanted to believe in the future we were building. I kept my face a mask of neutrality. Victoria subtly blotted the corner of her eye. He needed help, he said. He needed my family's entire real estate portfolio as collateral to secure the primary construction loan. He asked me to sign over power of attorney. Just temporarily, he said, just to prove to the banks that he had the capital. He swore it was all for our new family, for our son. A chilling realization settled deep in my stomach. So you handed him everything. Yes. Her eyes locked with mine, a single furious tear finally breaking loose and carving a path down her cheek. I helped him build this entire legacy, and he was with her for all of it. Her voice cracked on the final words. I leaned back in the booth. I had come prepared for accusations. I had steeled myself for her to deny everything. I was not prepared for this raw, soul-bearing confession. How long had it been going on? I asked gently. At least a year, probably more. Who knows? She pulled a compact from her purse, attempting to fix the damage a single tear had done. He said they were late-night design sessions. He called them meetings with the international investors, and I just smiled and brought him coffee and acted like the perfect supportive wife. Because I'm a fool. You are not a fool, Chloe. You are a woman who was systematically manipulated by a world-class narcissist. She let out a short, harsh laugh. A lot of good that does me now. Ben pushed a leather-bound binder across the table. This is our proposal for a joint venture. If you agree to file for divorce citing financial fraud and provide our team with your testimony, we will finance your entire legal fight and guarantee that you are the primary beneficiary when we force the company into liquidation. Chloe's head snapped up. Liquidation? You have a son on the way, don't you? A little boy? She just stared at him, her breathing becoming shallow. How did you know that? I know everything, Chloe. With our help, you can protect his future. You can build your own firm from the ashes of his. What if I refuse? Then you will fight him by yourself. His lawyers will bury you in litigation. They'll claim you breached the prenuptial agreement. They'll assassinate your character. By the time it's done, your son will be in first grade and your family's inheritance will be a memory. She reached for the binder. Her hands were shaking. How can I possibly trust you? I looked her directly in the eye. 10 people were in the boardroom, 6 from our side and 4 on a video conference for Julian's team. My lawyer Alex and I were positioned at the head of the long glass table. Alex stood and methodically laid out the case. The siphoned investment funds, the shell corporations, the falsified reports, my sworn affidavit, and the preliminary audit from the forensic accountants. When he concluded, a thick, heavy silence filled the room. Then Alex stood once more. He activated the main monitor, playing an audio file. It was Julian and Simone, his assistant, laughing in his car. The seed funding for that new AI venture is our ticket to a beachfront house in Carmel, Julian boasted. Alex's voice cut through the recording, calm and professional. My client's initial investment stipulated that 100% of profits were to be funneled back into the firm for the first 3 years. In this recording, Mr. Croft admits to his mistress he's diverting nearly $500,000 to a personal real estate purchase. One of the venture partners leaned forward. How can you be certain these funds were for her? Amelia then unlocked her tablet and slid it down the table. Displayed on the screen was a social media post from a private account. It was a selfie of a woman, Simone, standing in a sun drenched living room with a distinctive abstract sculpture in the background. The caption read, "Our new view is everything." I commissioned that sculpture for a client last year, Amelia said, her voice like steel. I know the artist, and I know the exact address in Carmel where it was delivered 2 weeks ago. The property was purchased by a shell corporation Julian set up last month. The air in the penthouse boardroom turned brittle. His mother, who was also a primary investor, let out a sharp gasp. His father's face hardened as he demanded to know what kind of sick joke this was. Julian just stared at the tablet, his face paling to a ghostly white. My eye for art is my greatest asset, Amelia stated coolly, and Julian's lack of discretion just bought me a divorce. The reaction was immediate. His mother stood up and slapped him hard across the face. A proposal to bring in the family's corporate attorney was passed without dissent. A second proposal for Julian to be escorted from the premises immediately passed 3-1. By 10 o'clock that night, I was in my sister's spare room in Sausalito, not our sprawling penthouse, gazing at the distant glow of San Francisco. My sister, Bianca, came to stand beside me. You actually did it. This is just the first step, I replied. What does that mean? She asked. That whole family built their empire on convenient truths and looking the other way. Julian learned from his father. So what's the move? To dismantle the entire charade. I'm giving Alex everything. Julian wanted to play games. He thought I was just some decorative wife who wouldn't notice. He can have the fallout. Later, Alex studied my face over a video call. And what about you? He asked gently. What's next for Amelia? I'm going to expand the gallery, find a new space, maybe somewhere downtown. A fresh start. By the next evening, the story had exploded across the tech news landscape. Every major outlet was running with it. Amelia Reed, celebrated art curator, files for divorce. Tech CEO Julian Croft, under investigation for massive investor fraud. My phone had buzzed over 200 times before I finally shut it off. I sat in my sister's apartment watching the fog roll over the bay, obscuring the city lights. The view was the same one I'd admired for years, but I was no longer the woman who saw promises in it. Bianca handed me a glass of herbal tea. So what is your first move? A faint smile touched my lips. Tomorrow I take back my house. She raised her eyebrows. The Pacific Heights mansion. It's mine legally. It was a premarital asset, something I purchased with the profits from my first major art sale, 8 years before I ever met Julian Croft. His parents moved in a few months ago to help with the pregnancy. It seems they've conveniently forgotten whose name is on the title deed. I took a slow sip of tea. I hadn't forgotten a single detail. At 3 p.m. on a breezy Wednesday, a pair of commercial moving trucks and a sheriff's vehicle parked on the steep incline of the street. I emerged from a black sedan, dressed in a sharp navy blue pantsuit, with Alex at my side, holding a freshly stamped eviction order. I had rehearsed this exact moment in my mind for months. The mansion was a modern marvel of glass and steel perched atop the hill, with panoramic views of the bay. The movers were already at the service entrance. Deputy Miller stood at the main door with a clipboard. A few curious neighbors were visible in their windows, their phones undoubtedly recording. My in-laws had made no real attempt to leave. A few expensive suitcases were placed near the door, a token effort. Eleanor stood beside them, her arms crossed tightly. Richard was just behind her, his face a mask of controlled rage, his jaw clenched. Simone was not there. She had been arrested earlier that day as a co-conspirator. No one had told Julian's sister yet. Or perhaps they had, and she was smart enough to keep her distance. The heavy oak door swung open. I walked in, with Alex right behind me. We moved across the polished concrete floor of the foyer. Deputy Miller gave a respectful nod. Mrs. Reed. Deputy. He read the eviction order in a loud, clear voice. By the authority of the Superior Court of California, Richard and Eleanor Croft are ordered to vacate this property effective immediately. You're permitted to take only your personal belongings. All other property, art, and furniture purchased with funds from Innovate Capital or currently under investigation must remain. Eleanor was the one who broke first. The Chanel clutch she was holding slipped from her fingers, landing on the marble entryway with a soft, expensive sigh. She rushed toward me, her perfectly manicured hands reaching out. Chloe, darling, please. This is your home. Think of the baby. Think of what people will say. I moved past her without a word. I didn't hesitate. I didn't glance in her direction. I gave no sign I had even heard her. Eleanor staggered back against the modern art piece, her carefully constructed poise crumbling. Arthur, her husband, tried to assert some control. He straightened his tie. You need to consider the repercussions of this little sin, he said, his voice a low threat. The press, the company's stock, our family's reputation. I finally stopped and turned to face him, my gaze cold enough to freeze fire. The press is already having a field day. I couldn't care less about the stock, and as for the family's reputation, I allowed a faint, icy smile to touch my lips. Your son destroyed that all by himself. The blood drained from Arthur's face. Sophie's driver pulled up to the curb 10 minutes later. She stepped out of the black sedan with a quiet grace, her expression unreadable. She walked into the penthouse foyer and laid a gentle hand on her mother's arm. Mother, she said softly, she's hurting. We should give her some space. Eleanor looked at her daughter, her face a mess of tears and smudged Dior makeup. Sophie, you have to talk to her. Make her be reasonable. Sophie's eyes met mine from across the vast room. We stared at each other for a long moment. I saw no pity in her look, but I saw something else. A quiet, shared understanding. She turned back to her mother. I'll see what I can do. She walked toward me, raising her voice just enough for her parents to overhear. Chloe, this is all so dramatic. They're still your family. Her eyes, however, told a completely different story. They screamed, do not give them an inch. Arthur grabbed his daughter's elbow. Tell her, Sophie. Tell her how insane this is. Sophie looked at him, then let her gaze drift across the penthouse, taking in the priceless art and custom furniture, all bought with stolen trust. She looked back at her father. You created this situation, Dad, she said, her tone level but sharp as a razor. You sat beside him at the deposition. You let Julian lie about every single thing. You chose your side. She gracefully removed her arm from his grip and turned her back on him. Eleanor pushed herself away from the wall. She retrieved her handbag from the floor and walked toward the private elevator. She took out her phone and summoned a car. Arthur called out, Eleanor, where in God's name are you going? She never looked back. Somewhere with a little integrity. The elevator arrived 3 minutes later. Eleanor stepped in, and the polished steel doors slid shut. The installation was meant to be finished by 5. Chloe knelt on the silk rug in the nursery, fiddling with the final sensor on a state-of-the-art smart bassinet. She needed the organic baby formula Julian was supposed to have picked up. Frustrated, she grabbed his tablet from the charging station, thinking he might have left a confirmation email on it. As she swiped it open, a notification from a high-end florist caught her eye. Your delivery of the oracle arrangement is complete. Her heart went still. She didn't recognize the address on Perry Street. Trembling with a sudden cold dread, she Googled the florist. Their latest Instagram post showcased a rising tech star, Sienna Vance, Julian's brilliant new protege, posing in a chic apartment with a breathtakingly rare orchid. The caption gushed, the one-of-a-kind oracle finding a home with the incredible Sienna Vance. A sharp, furious kick from inside her belly made her gasp. An hour later, Julian walked in, grinning about a 9-figure funding round he'd just closed. He leaned in to kiss her, but she flinched away. His smile faded. What is it, my love? Is the baby all right? She held up the tablet, the image of Sienna beaming on the screen. All the color vanished from his face. He took a step back, stammering. That's a corporate gift, a business development expense. His usually steady eyes wouldn't meet hers. It is not what it looks like. He started to ramble, accusing her of snooping through his private accounts, of letting her pregnancy hormones turn her into a paranoid hysteric. How could you invade my privacy like this? Her own control finally snapped. You did this, she whispered, her voice shaking with a cold, quiet fury. She turned and strode into their master bedroom, pulling a large Rimowa suitcase from the top of the walk in closet. He trailed after her, his voice suddenly desperate. Chloe, please, this kind of stress is terrible for the baby. He swore he loved her, that Sienna meant absolutely nothing. She was just a talented CEO. He couldn't risk losing to a competitor. It was just good business. Chloe didn't even bother to turn around. By 6:30, the suitcase was packed. Julian stood in the bedroom doorway, physically blocking her path. He begged her not to leave, not to detonate their entire future over one stupid, meaningless gift. She shoved past him and locked herself in the serene, newly painted nursery. The scent of new beginnings felt like a cruel joke. On the other side of the door, Julian's pleading turned into angry, frustrated pounding. Her phone vibrated. It was Maya. Are you okay? Chloe shook her head, unable to form words. Maya's voice turned to steel. I am on my way. Do not, under any circumstances, leave that penthouse. He is the one who has to go. Maya, her best friend and the most feared divorce attorney in Manhattan, was in command now. The war had officially begun. Chloe stood alone in the baby's room, walking over to the gallery wall of their wedding photos. Pictures from the Hamptons, laughing on a yacht. The two of them looking so happy, so invincible. She took down the largest frame, a candid shot from their first anniversary, and placed it face down on the floor. Through the floor to ceiling window, she watched the lights of New York City begin to glitter. She watched her husband finally give up and collapse on the living room sofa. She watched him wake up hours later and robotically start the espresso machine. One single hot tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it away with raw anger. So this is what it feels like, she whispered to the silent, perfect room. The next morning, a message from Maya illuminated her screen. He's been served. Months ago, those words would have shattered her world. Now they were just the first shot fired. The preliminary hearing was scheduled in 2 weeks. Sterling versus Sterling, in the Supreme Court of New York. 6 weeks to tear down 3 years of a beautifully constructed lie. She made a point to eat breakfast at their dining table every single morning, right where he would have to see her. The affair had cost her a husband. This betrayal was about to dismantle an entire kingdom built on code. The arbitration was held at Sterling, Finch and Associates, a firm that commanded the entire 50th floor of a glass tower overlooking the Chicago River. Through the vast windows, the city sprawled out, indifferent. This was the kind of room where fortunes were unmade. The silence was heavy, charged with unspoken accusations. Teams of lawyers and forensic analysts flanked the walls like soldiers. Beside me sat Izzy, my college roommate, now my legal champion, her composure a fortress. At the other end of the mahogany table, Julian's counsel, Arthur Finch, sat with an air of predatory patience. 61, with a mane of silver hair and a legendary reputation for leaving spouses with nothing but their regrets. He was the architect of our ironclad prenup. Now he was here to ensure Julian Croft, my husband, kept his 10-figure tech empire intact. My lawyer Izzy stood tall, the same woman who had been my maid of honor 3 years ago, the one who told me the prenup was just a standard formality for a man in his position. The irony was a bitter pill. Julian was at the far end, his handsome features twisted into a mask of indignation. His lawyer was known for his scorched earth tactics, but Izzy had him on defense, and everyone in the room could feel it. The first week was a deep dive into a digital labyrinth. It took 3 full days just to get the encryption keys to his primary servers. I scrutinized every transaction: a fledgling AI company, a portfolio of crypto holdings, an offshore data hosting firm, and a collection of priceless digital art. The defense argued that every asset was shielded by the prenup's intellectual property clause. The arbitrator felt differently. On day 4, Izzy delivered her opening statement. This is a case of grand theft, executed under the guise of a partnership, she said, her voice echoing in the quiet room. Julian Croft didn't merely have an affair. He systematically siphoned marital assets using encrypted transactions, committed wire fraud to finance his secret life, and deceived his pregnant wife into believing they were building a future together, all while orchestrating a plan to use a fraudulent document to protect his crimes. She projected two blockchain ledgers onto the screen behind her: our joint venture capital fund and the ledger of a ghost corporation showing perfectly mirrored crypto transfers. There are three people in this marriage, she concluded. This was meticulous, this was malicious, and the defendant orchestrated every single move. Arthur Finch rose slowly for the defense. This is a case about a scorned woman exploiting her pregnancy for a payday. He gestured toward me. Romantic indiscretions are a private matter, not a federal crime. Chloe Croft enjoyed the fruits of this marriage for 3 years. She is emotional, she is unstable, and she is using her family's significant influence to destroy her husband. The lawyers turned to watch me. I held their gaze, my face a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. Julian's former executive assistant testified on Monday morning of the second week. Izzy asked her to recount the events of September 10th, 2025. The assistant, a young woman clutching her hands in her lap, spoke softly. Mr. Croft came into the office unusually early. Around 6 a.m., he had me book a last-minute flight to Monaco, first class. He said Miss Dubois had to be on the same flight, in an adjacent suite. I asked for the project name for the expense. He just said, code it to Chimera. Don't ask questions. What happened then? I booked everything as instructed. Miss Dubois was at his hotel suite by 8 p.m. that evening. What he didn't realize was that I had already booked his wife a surprise ticket for that same weekend, an anniversary trip he made me cancel just hours before. He told me to lie if she asked, but the confirmation had already gone through. The cross-examination was vicious. Arthur Finch tried to paint the assistant as a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. She remained perfectly still. I should have come forward 2 years ago, she said, her voice gaining resolve. But Mr. Croft threatened to blacklist me in the tech world. I have a mortgage. I was terrified. That doesn't mean I'm not telling the truth. It just means I'm human. Our eyes met as she walked past the table. I gave her a small, imperceptible nod. She returned it. A forensic IT expert took the stand on Tuesday. He confessed to everything: the $120,000 custom software for her consulting firm, the 5 crypto transfers, the backdated server logs. Izzy displayed the blockchain records on the screen. 5 deposits: March 3rd, April 17th, and May 21st. Mr. Croft told me it was seed funding for a stealth startup, the tech expert testified. He promised me that Mrs. Croft was a silent partner and fully aware of the project. I believed him. Arthur Finch was on his feet in an instant. You are testifying today in return for full immunity from prosecution, correct? Yes. So please tell the court, why should anyone here believe a single word you have to say? The expert looked directly at the arbitrator. Because the blockchain is immutable, the data is still the truth. By the end of the second week, the prosecution called Professor Alistair Grant, a cybersecurity analyst from MIT. 63 years old, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a career spanning 3 decades, he was the best expert witness you could find, and Izzy had him. Professor Grant walked the arbitrator through my initial seed funding. Mrs. Croft's contributions accounted for a K-17 initial capital investment. This portfolio is fundamentally sound. It's brilliant work. He then displayed Julian's altered investment structure. Mr. Croft funneled those exact funds into a decentralized autonomous organization, a DAO that represents a 41% devaluation of shared marital assets. Any second-year finance student would flag that as profoundly illegal. He then played a 3D visualization of the digital money trail. The lawyers leaned in, transfixed. The primary investment account was systematically drained. The anonymous crypto wallet swelled. The family trust was breached. $5 million disappeared because Mr. Croft valued his affair more than his own family, Professor Grant concluded. The defense called their own expert, but he was young, arrogant, and his arguments fell apart under Izzy's questioning. The arbitrator was visibly unimpressed. On Friday afternoon of the third week, my parents took the stand. My mother, graceful and composed at 68, went first. She wore a simple navy dress. Her hand shook as she placed it on the witness stand. My daughter Chloe was gutted by his deception, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Our first grandchild is due in 4 weeks. That child will grow up in a broken home because of his greed. She asks me why Daddy is so angry. I show her pictures of them smiling, but it's not him anymore. She turned her gaze to Julian. You stole her childhood from her before she was even born. My father testified next. My daughter is 33, he said, his voice cracking. She was building a life, a family. His mistress still wears the diamond earrings he bought her. She flaunts them on social media. She has no shame. My best friend Maya was the last to testify that day. My client was his partner in every way, she stated, looking at the arbitrator. She poured her heart into that company. She wasn't supposed to learn about any of this. She found out by pure chance when a photo from his supposed business trip synced to their shared cloud storage. The room was completely still. Julian just stared at the polished surface of the table. He refused to look up. He wouldn't meet a single person's eye. I let a single tear roll down my cheek. It was the first time anyone had seen me show any emotion since this began. My father passed me a handkerchief. I dabbed my eyes and kept watching. Week 4 was reserved for Annalise. Week 5 was for the forensic accountants to detail the full extent of the fraud, but week 4 was the one I had been dreading and anticipating. Week 4, Annalise Dubois would have to answer for her actions. On that Monday, Annalise Dubois was called to the stand. The color drained from Julian's face. Annalise wasn't just there to admit to an affair. She was about to detonate the entire conspiracy to embezzle millions in shared assets. Every word from her mouth would be another nail in his professional coffin. Annalise took the stand on Monday afternoon during the fourth week of the proceedings. She wore a severe charcoal gray suit, her blonde hair pulled into a severe chignon. She never once looked at Julian, who sat frozen at the defense table. She addressed the arbitrator directly. The prosecutor, Mr. Harris, began. Miss Dubois, can you describe your role in the growth of Nexus Dynamics? Annalise's voice was crisp and unapologetic. I was the chief operating officer who helped my CEO build a $62.5 million European software division. I landed the keystone accounts, I crafted our international brand identity, and I helped him conceal a 2-year-long affair. Harris projected internal company communications onto the large screens, hundreds of pages of them. Annalise walked the room through every detail of the secret ghost project in Luxembourg, the offshore servers used to process payments, and the Shelaita consulting firms in the Cayman Islands that paid for their lavish trips and expensive gifts. Then Mr. Davies displayed a Slack message on the courtroom monitors, dated 2 months before my due date. From Sienna Vance to Julian Sterling. Subject, the Chloe problem. We need a plan for your wife. Her prenup gives her a stake in the algorithm. She's too smart to just sign it away. We need a permanent solution. Julian's reply was chillingly simple. Handling it. Trust me. A wave of murmurs swept through the gallery. Julian's lawyer rose for the cross-examination. You are testifying today in exchange for a more lenient sentencing in your own fraud case, are you not? Yes. You also discovered he was involved with other women, not just you. So this is personal, isn't it? Sienna looked directly at the lawyer. It's both, but my motives do not change the facts. The jury was captivated. Ethan took the stand on Tuesday of week 5. He was in a somber charcoal suit. His hands were rock steady as he was sworn in, but I could see a tiny muscle jumping in his jaw. Mister? Davies had him walk the court through the money trail, the falsified investment reports, the shell corporations. Ethan laid it all out with calm, methodical clarity. And then Mr. Davies asked, When did you first realize your CEO was planning to defraud his wife? Ethan paused, taking a deep breath. 3 weeks before the fraud became public. And why then? Ethan held up a document for the court. I recovered Julian's calendar from a wiped server. He had scheduled a strategy session with his divorce attorneys for 10 a.m. on September 12th, 2025. Mr. Davies leaned forward. What is the significance of that particular date and time? Ethan's eyes flickered toward me for a fraction of a second. At 9:45 a.m. that same morning, Julian sent his wife a text confirming their final tour of the maternity ward at Mount Sinai. She met him there at 11. The courtroom was so still you could hear the air conditioning hum. Mr. Carter, Mr. Davies said, his voice slow and deliberate. Are you telling this court that Julian Sterling let his pregnant wife believe he was joyfully preparing for the birth of their child, while he was in a meeting actively plotting to leave her and that child with nothing? Ethan's own voice cracked as he replied, Yes. His plan was to claim she was emotionally unstable because of the pregnancy. When that didn't work, plan B was to brand her a gold digger. The grand ballroom of the museum fell silent. My lawyer, Miss Albright, held up a hand to the MC for a moment. Miss Albright then gestured to the main screen behind the stage. An image appeared, a text exchange between Julian and Sienna. She's getting suspicious. Just lay low. Sienna's reply, Don't worry, baby, she's too busy nesting to notice you're building me a nest of my own. Julian's lawyer leaped to his feet. This is an invasion of privacy. This is inadmissible. Overruled, the event's host, a retired federal judge, announced into the microphone, The speaker may proceed. I sat frozen at our table. I couldn't feel my hands. I couldn't breathe. My husband had been mocking me. My sister-in-law put a hand on my shoulder. I was trembling uncontrollably. Julian had been on that very stage only minutes before, accepting an award. It was a calculated risk. His PR team had advised against it, but Julian was always arrogant. His lawyer had fed him a series of carefully vetted questions. Did you and your wife have a fight? Every couple does. We're handling it. Do you care about your family? It is my entire world. My unborn child is everything. Amelia rose from her seat during the gala's open mic session. She spoke with a calm, chilling clarity that cut through the ballroom. Mr. Vance, could you clarify this expense report? Private charter to Anguilla for Miss Thorne. Julian froze. That could be a client, a potential investor. It was booked for the weekend of your 5th wedding anniversary. I'm not in charge of accounting. You aren't in charge of remembering where you were when your wife was home alone? I was working, but you approved a wire transfer for a condo down payment. Julian's face turned a deep shade of purple. She was a corporate security risk. That digital art patent should have been under our company's name. My team developed that algorithm. I deserve that intellectual property. The entire auditorium went dead silent. Julian's mentor, a man on the board of directors, slowly put his head in his hands. Julian realized what he'd just confessed. He tried to backtrack. I mean, for the company's portfolio, but the admission had been made. The verdict was delivered in a wave of shocked whispers. Amelia just gave a slight nod. Julian Vance didn't just have an affair. He orchestrated a theft, a year-long campaign of lies, and he gaslit his pregnant wife into thinking she was paranoid. She gestured towards Julian. Greed, betrayal, and emotional abuse, all laid bare for 300 of your most important colleagues and backers. Julian's father tried a weak defense. He took the stage, grabbed the microphone, and rambled about the pressures of success, about private matters being misconstrued. The audience was not moved. The jury of his peers held their silent judgment for the remainder of the evening. I watched the entire implosion from the main ballroom's mezzanine level. My best friend sat right next to me. It didn't matter what the press release said. The people in that boardroom knew the real story. I want him gone, I stated, my voice like ice. He needs to be a ghost in this company. My co-founder Olivia gave a firm nod. He will be. By 9 a.m. Monday, the news had broken. TechCrunch and The Verge had the story. Key venture capitalists were retracting their Series B funding for his new AI venture. Julian sat across the polished mahogany table, his face a tight mask of disbelief and rage. The lead director of the board called his personal line. We backed you during the data breach investigation, Julian. We can't back you on this. Has the board voted? Julian asked, his voice strained. The director paused. We have, son. He sighed heavily. You need to step down. Julian stood, his face pale. A visible tremor shook his hands. First, a breach of fiduciary duty. The vote? Unanimous removal. Second, misappropriation of company assets. The vote? Unanimous removal. Third, a violation of his executive non-compete clause. The vote? Unanimous removal. Fourth, a conspiracy to defraud the shareholders. The vote? Unanimous removal. The boardroom was electric with tension. His rivals on the board exchanged subtle, triumphant looks. The journalists outside pressed against the frosted glass, their phones recording. Julian collapsed back into his leather chair, his head in his hands. I closed my eyes, feeling a single hot tear escape and trail down my cheek. My friend Olivia squeezed my hand under the table. It's over? The lead director tapped his pen on the table for silence. The transition of all of Mr. Vance's projects will be effective immediately, to be concluded by January 22nd. Mr. Vance is to be escorted from the building. 2 security guards entered the room, placed a security lock on his laptop bag, and guided him out of the boardroom he had built. His gaze never once met mine. I stepped out into the brutal New York wind that whipped down the canyon of skyscrapers. Olivia was right there with me. The tech reporters swarmed us like sharks, shouting my name. Olivia formed a barrier around me, and through the chaos, I saw them. Julian's parents, Catherine and William, standing beside a black town car. Catherine moved towards me, her expression pleading. For the first time in 5 years, I turned my back on her and didn't stop walking. The final settlement meeting was on January 22nd. The mediator was concise. Mr. Vance, you have systematically exploited your position of power for personal and reckless pursuits. It would be the last time I saw Julian as anything more than a memory. Next time it would be across a deposition table. The boardroom was abuzz one last time on that frigid January evening. The city was freezing, the kind of wet cold that seeps into your bones. The holidays had been a blur. Twinkling lights along Fifth Avenue seemed to mock the emptiness of our lives. There was no cheer in our Tribeca penthouse. I showed up with Olivia and my attorney Marcus Thorne. We took the seats at the head of the table, the ones I'd always reserved for our annual shareholders meeting. His parents lingered by the door, separated from us by a chasm of lawyers and 2 months of their son's lies. They were weathering their own social exile for their complicity. Julian was brought in by the last lawyer who hadn't dropped him. He wore a Tom Ford suit that now seemed to hang off his frame. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets. His face was gaunt and pale, his eyes hollow, his shoulders slumped. He was a shell of the man I knew, a titan carved out from the inside. He refused to look at me. The lead director entered. We all stood. Please try to eat something. The silence in our penthouse was a crushing force, broken only by the faint scream of a siren 40 floors below. Julian finally looked at me, his eyes pleading for a forgiveness he would never receive. The arbitration of our life together had commenced. I spoke first. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city, a hand resting on my 7-month pregnant stomach. I wore a simple white dress, the perfect power couple image we had projected, a carefully constructed illusion, was now being dismantled under fluorescent lights. 5 years of our partnership meant absolutely nothing to you, I began, my voice clear and strong. I had rehearsed this for days. But our son will be taught that character is non-negotiable, that men who sacrifice their family for a cheap thrill will face the consequences. I was your partner in every sense of the word. I deserved your loyalty. Our child deserved a father. I felt the last ember of affection for him die in that moment. A few months ago, I was sitting on our custom-made sofa, believing I was the most fortunate woman alive, the co-founder of a perfect world. Now, I was its demolitions expert. Julian's turn. He was a 6-foot monument to manufactured charisma. his expensive haircut perfectly messy, his hands spread in a gesture of pathetic contrition. Chloe, it was an error in judgment, he whispered, his voice dripping with insincere sorrow. It was nothing, she was just a fling. A fling. The word felt so insignificant, so insulting for the devastation he had caused. She has a name, Julian. I locked my eyes on his, daring him to look away. You risked our entire company, our future, our family for a fling. I hope losing it all finally teaches you the value of what you so carelessly destroyed. She was in her late 20s, a sharp witted data scientist at a rival firm, her ambition a weapon. Ava Monroe. I had seen her profile on LinkedIn. My husband didn't just have an affair with her, he chose her. He chose his own ego. He ceased to exist for me in that instant. But you, I pointed a trembling finger at him. You didn't just break a promise, you tore down the company we built from scratch. The family we were starting, the future I poured every ounce of my soul into. That is what I can never, ever forgive. I took my seat. The only sound in the penthouse was my own ragged breathing. Julian stared at me. Chloe, you have every right to be this angry. I stood up again, my legs feeling unsteady. I walked towards the master bedroom we once shared. I didn't need notes. For the last 72 hours, this speech was the only thing in my mind. A year of planning our expansion, a year of picking out colors for the nursery, a year of coming to terms with the fact that my entire identity had been swallowed by his. Julian didn't just take my peace of mind, I said. He stole so much more. He stole my ability to trust my own instincts, my sense of security in my own company. He tried to tell me I was imagining things, and when I presented him with evidence, he blamed my insecurities on pregnancy hormones. I looked at Julian. He was fixated on the polished marble floor. His designer suit suddenly looked like a cheap imitation. For weeks, all I wanted was to scream. I wanted you to suffer the same way I did. But I don't want that anymore. I just want this to be over. I want you to spend every single day of your life knowing that you are the singular architect of your own downfall. I needed him to understand that every lie, every secret data transfer, every embezzled dollar, every single betrayal had led him to this exact moment. I inhaled deeply, making sure he could see I had not only survived, but had started to heal, that he had utterly failed to break me. I went back to my chair. Julian still wouldn't meet my eyes, but I saw his hands. They were shaking uncontrollably. The lead director opened the final folder. He cleared his throat and looked directly at Julian. Mr. Julian Vance, he started, you are a celebrated innovator. You built a $1 billion brand on the promise of vision and integrity. You have violated that promise in the most fundamental way. The careers of 3 of your executive partners are now at risk because you placed your ego above this company. Your wife's health was put in jeopardy by your deception. You attempted to sabotage her position as CMO. You siphoned nearly $2 million in company funds to finance a secret life. You deceived your investors. You have shown absolutely no real remorse. He paused. The entire boardroom seemed to stop breathing. This board sentences you to professional and financial ruin. You are no longer welcome in this industry. You are hereby ordered to accept the company's buyout of your shares for $1.9 million, accounting for financial damages, and to pay $3.5 million to Miss Chloe Reed for breach of contract and emotional distress. Julian's lawyer shot to his feet. On my client's behalf, we will be filing an appeal. Denied, the director cut him off. Security will escort you from the premises. 2 large men in dark suits approached the table. They took Julian by each arm. He stood up slowly, his body rigid with shock. He glanced at the head of the table. Then, for the first time that entire night, he looked at me. Our eyes connected across the vast room. I showed him nothing. No smile, no tears. I simply held his gaze until he flinched and broke contact. He was escorted from the boardroom. The heavy glass doors hissed shut behind him with a quiet final click. The director continued. As for Ava Monroe, given your direct involvement and the evidence presented, this board will be pursuing legal action. and you are sentenced to a 5-year blacklisting from any venture capital funded tech firm in this state. You will struggle to find work. Ava, present via video call, went pale, her face frozen on the screen. She gave one small, jerky nod. Her screen went dark. Catherine and William Vance, you both face an 18-month censure from the Board of Directors Guild for your role in enabling this fraud. You will resign from all board positions within 30 days. My former in laws registered no emotion. Catherine was crying silently, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. William stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. Marcus Thorne, a 3-year suspension from the Financial Professionals Guild. You are permanently barred from holding any fiduciary position in the tech sector. Marcus nodded once, slowly. He was led out. The lead director closed his file. This emergency session is now concluded. 100 whispers immediately filled the void. Outside, the January air was sharp enough to cut. My friends, Olivia and Oliver, stood on either side of me. Reporters yelled my name. Camera flashes popping like fireworks. I kept my eyes fixed forward. I wouldn't give them a single quote. Then I saw them, Julian's parents, waiting by the fleet of black cars. Catherine hurried over, her face a wreck of tears and smudged makeup. Chloe, my love, this is all just a dreadful, dreadful misunderstanding. We had no idea he was seeing someone else. Please, if you'll just allow us to explain. You had 2 months to believe me, I said, my voice flat and cold. My tone was quiet, glacial. I had rehearsed this exact moment 1,000 times in my mind. You had 6 months to ask a single question, to wonder why he was suddenly working until 3 a.m. Every night to have one shred of doubt about his perfect story. You said nothing. You stood by him. Now that choice is something you have to carry for the rest of your lives. Andrew, his father, took a step closer. We are so sorry. We were blind. Can we just try to fix this? I looked from him to his wife. I felt absolutely nothing. Not fury, not heartbreak, just a hollow, cold void where my in-laws used to be. No, I said. I turned and walked away without looking back. My lawyer Ben and my sister fell in line with me. My sister glanced over. Are you all right? I'm getting there. 2 days later, I was in a sterile, glass-walled meeting room in Ben's downtown office. Julian was already there, sitting across from me, a thick legal document on the polished table between us. The dissolution of assets and intellectual property is ready for your signature, Clara, Ben said softly. I took the offered pen, signed my name, and pushed the document back across the table. Julian just stared, his face a hollow mask. You're actually doing this? He asked, his voice cracking. I'm starting fresh, I answered, keeping my eyes on the city skyline. I'm building something that is mine, something that isn't founded on deception. You can have the house in Pacific Heights, the stock portfolio, the entire venture fund. I was never interested in any of it. Ben stood up, clearing his throat. I will get these filed with the court this afternoon. He gave my arm a reassuring squeeze and then let himself out. The silence that filled the room was immense. Thank you, Julian whispered to the empty chair where I had been sitting. Just take care of the people you hurt, I said, my voice completely flat. That night, inside my new, sparsely furnished apartment, I was scrolling through a tech industry gossip site on my laptop. The headline was stark. San Francisco's tech prince dethroned, Julian Vance's affair, and fraud exposed. Below it was a picture of Julian being mobbed by reporters outside his office, and another of me, expressionless, leaving our former high-rise with a single suitcase. I snapped the laptop shut. I sat there in the darkness, staring out at the distant lights of the Golden Gate Bridge. The city I had come to call home now felt foreign and hostile. The life I had poured my heart into building was now just rubble. It was over. So why did it feel like the real fight was only just beginning? 1 year later, an email from an unknown sender landed in my inbox. The subject was simple, just his name, Julian Vance. For 3 entire days, I just stared at his request to talk. I'd closed the window only to open it again an hour later. I called my sister Amelia, who reminded me that I didn't owe him a single second of my time. On the third day, I typed out a one-word response. I gave him the name of a small, forgotten coffee shop. Yes, we would meet in a quiet part of the Mission District, a world away from the glittering galas and boardrooms we used to inhabit. It was simple, anonymous, and very, very public. A year has gone by, and I am no longer that woman. I am healing, but the damage is now a permanent part of who I am. I only agreed to see him to put a final definitive end to this chapter. My new architectural firm is located on the third floor of a renovated warehouse in Soma. A simple steel sign on the door reads Reyes Design. It is small, selective, and completely mine. I have a team of 12 and we showcase our new projects quarterly. On the wall behind my desk hangs the Architectural Digest Innovator of the Year award. I received it last month. Amelia sent me a card that simply said, Your empire is just beginning. Ben sent over a case of expensive scotch, not to celebrate a victory, but to toast a new beginning. My joy is now found in the small things, like unrolling a fresh set of blueprints, bringing a new design to life from a mere concept. This time it cannot be tainted by anyone else's lies. The decision to meet Julian took an entire week of mental arguments. Amelia had been firm. You don't need his apology. I told her, I know. This isn't about closure from him, it's for me. A true period at the end of the sentence. I took a car across town on a bleak, foggy November afternoon. November. The cycle was complete. The sky was a thick, oppressive gray, and a damp chill rolled in from the bay. I sat at a table in the back for 5 minutes, my hands wrapped around the warm mug, trying to regulate my breathing. The cafe was warm and inviting, filled with the smell of fresh coffee and the low hum of conversation. A barista with blue hair called out an order for Julian. I looked up. He was a shadow of the man he once was, sitting at table 9. I waited. The memories of our old life came flooding back. The smell of his expensive aftershave, the sound of champagne flutes clinking, the painfully artificial smiles of people who sold pieces of their souls for a higher stock price. But this time I was just an observer. This time I had all the control. I could stand up and walk out whenever I wanted. This coffee shop was not some exclusive members-only club. It was a safe, neutral ground, defined by 4 walls. 2 rows of simple wooden tables filled the space, and the walls were adorned with black and white photos of old San Francisco. I sat at table 9 and held my position. The bell over the door jingled and Julian entered. I almost didn't recognize him. The designer hoodie he was wearing was 2 sizes too big, draping over his thin frame. He must have lost 30 pounds, his face was gaunt, and his shoulders looked narrow and weak. Gray hair now streaked his temples, something new. His hands were shaking as he sat down across from me. He couldn't meet my eyes. You came? His voice was hoarse. I really didn't think you would come. I nearly didn't, I replied. The silence that settled between us was suffocating. Julian swallowed hard. Thank you. Don't thank me. He looked down at his own hands. The fingers that once wore a heavy signet ring from his Ivy League school were now bony and pale. Clara, I am sorry. I know that word means nothing now, but I am so, so sorry. I said nothing. I just let him sit in his own discomfort. I've had a year to do nothing but think. He took a shaky breath. I was so envious of you. From the moment you drafted your first blueprint, you had this spark, this talent that was completely your own. My father groomed me to be a king of Silicon Valley, but you were the true creator. I couldn't stand it. The pressure from the board, from everyone, to just keep acquiring, keep growing, it corrupted something inside me. His voice broke. That's not an excuse. I ruined the lives of 3 families with what I did. I tried to ruin you, he whispered, his eyes welling up. I destroyed us. I destroyed everything. I'm not here asking you to forgive me. I needed to say it to your face. I'm sorry. From the very bottom of my soul, I'm sorry. I stayed silent for what seemed like an eternity, watching him break down, watching the unbridgeable gulf that now lay between us. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel rage. All I felt was a profound, cold emptiness. Julian, I said, my voice perfectly steady. I came here today for a single reason. He looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen. There is no forgiveness, not for you, not from me. He flinched, as if my words were a physical blow. You didn't just burn 3 years of my life, I continued. You burned my chance at being the mother. Julian looked completely shattered. What are you talking about? The stress, the public humiliation, my doctors were very explicit. The complications brought on by the scandal you created. I lost the baby. I held his gaze, forcing him to witness my pain. You took our home, our friends, my reputation, and our child, and you did it all while kissing my cheek every morning and telling me that you loved me. Julian shook his head, the tears now freely streaming down his face. I I didn't know. I never. I am not forgiving you. I cut him off, my voice like steel. Forgiveness is for mistakes. You made choices, deliberate, calculated choices. You chose your ego over our vows. You chose your greed over our family. You chose your own ambition over the lives of everyone you hurt. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper as cold as the November fog outside. Choices have consequences. A ruined legacy is your consequence. Never being forgiven is mine. He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. Do you hate me? I thought about the question for a moment and gave him the truth. No, I don't hate you. Hate is an investment. I have no more of my energy to give you. You're just someone I used to know. I paused. The man I thought I married was never real to begin with. He let out a choked, ragged sob. My parents, they still ask about you on our weekly calls. A cold, humorless smile formed on my lips. Let me be perfectly clear. Richard and Eleanor Croft are nothing to me. I officially reverted to my maiden name, Reed, 6 months ago. I paused, letting the words sink in. The Croft tech legacy dies with you. I heard the venture firm is being liquidated to cover the investor lawsuits. That's all that's left. I pushed my chair back from the conference table and stood. Goodbye, Julian. This is the last time we will ever speak. Wait, he begged, his palms flat on the table as he started to get up. Are you happy? I considered his question for a moment. I'm building something real, something that's mine. It's founded on truth, not on lies. So, yes, I am getting there. He slumped back into his chair, nodding slowly as tears welled in his eyes. I'm glad. You deserve to be happy. My sister's voice on the phone later was a warm comfort. I am, I said, and then I hung up. Julian pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the window, his shoulders slumped. I didn't glance back as I walked out of the law office. The valet held the car door open. Will you be needing your car again this evening, Mrs. Reed? No, thank you, I said. Driving back over the bridge to Sausalito, my phone rang. Amelia, how did it go? It was Alex, my lawyer. It went exactly as it needed to, I told him. He was quiet for a second. The judge signed the final asset transfer this morning. It's 25 million. It's one of the largest settlements I've ever handled in a case like this. I managed a small, weary smile. My life was now this: a quiet guest room, a handful of boxes, and a tiny fragile sense of hope for the future. No opulent mansion, no crushing expectations, and no heavy Croft name to carry. I recently saw the key fob that started it all, the polished logo of an Aston Martin sitting on the counter, a tiny piece of technology that held the digital breadcrumbs that unraveled my marriage, Richard, Julian, Eleanor. In the story I was now writing, there was only one name that mattered: Amelia. That is how I am taking back my own story, by focusing on what was true. I am speaking with a therapist, a kind woman who specializes in betrayal trauma. She is patient, allowing me to heal at my own speed. We rarely talk about the future, and perhaps that is for the best. I still attend my prenatal appointments every month. My doctor says my blood pressure has returned to normal. She asked how it felt to finally see Julian. I told her it felt like closure. I do not speak to his parents. Their personal assistant tried to schedule a call twice. I had my own assistant politely decline both times. Some bridges are not worth rebuilding. My sister brings me dinner every Friday. We laugh. We talk about the gallery. She never brings him up. She just understands. People ask if I regret my refusal to forgive him. They say forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. I disagree. For me, withholding forgiveness is a necessary act of self-preservation. It is a clear and final statement that what he did was unforgivable. It's my way of protecting what is left of my own heart. Some wounds do not fully heal, they leave scars. Some betrayals can never be mended. And some people simply do not deserve absolution. Tonight, I sit in my sister's guest room, my new project laid out on the desk. Architectural plans for the gallery's new downtown location, a space for emerging artists, new community, a sanctuary built by me. I want their voices to be heard. I want it to be a place of hope. As I work, the lights of San Francisco glitter across the bay, shimmering like a promise. A quiet chime from my phone interrupts the silence. It's Chloe, my sister, with her routine message. You good? I text back. I am, I promise. Good, I love you more. I toss the phone aside, my eyes landing on the half assembled crib. My mind drifts, showing me a panoramic view of the Miami skyline from our penthouse. It shows me a woman who thought she had it all, meticulously building a future that was already a lie. Some betrayals don't just crack a relationship, they shatter its very foundation. Certain choices carve out the person you become. But to truly endure, you must decide who gets to be in your tomorrow and who is forever relegated to yesterday, and then stand by that decision without a shred of regret. For anyone hearing my tale, learn this now. A lover's deceit is an inferno that consumes the home you built together. I learned that lesson in the most brutal way. 3 times I whispered a prayer in that hollow oceanfront apartment. The first time was on night 1, shivering on the marble floor. The second was on night 2, when I saw the custom necklace he designed for me clasped around her asterisk neck at the gala. The third was on night 3, when I begged not for him to come back, but for the courage to light the match myself. The universe didn't send a sign, it gave me a spine of steel. This kind of retribution is a soul shredding, agonizing affair. I won my independence. Arthur is a bachelor once more. His parents mourned the loss of the heir they were so eagerly awaiting. But the price? The man I thought I loved was a ghost. Was it worth the devastation? Absolutely, because my own sanity was more valuable than the gilded cage we called a marriage. So here is my warning. Don't be the woman I was. Don't wait for a public spectacle to confirm what your soul has been screaming at you. Don't normalize the little cuts of disrespect until you're bleeding out. Fortify your heart. Leave anyone who prioritizes their own reflection over your soul, even if they share your bed. Forgiveness is optional. Self-respect is not. I spent 3 sleepless nights plotting my escape because there was nothing left of my old life to save. You don't have to go through that. Let my ruin be your lesson. Listen to the unease coiling in your gut. Keep a record of every lie, every discrepancy, and never ever allow anyone, husband or not, to convince you that your perception is flawed. This ordeal taught me another lesson. Family isn't about a shared name. It's about unwavering loyalty. It's my sister, Chloe, handing me the keys to her place without a single question. It's my friends who packed my life into boxes while I cried. It's my attorney who saw my strength when Arthur's family tried to paint me as unhinged. You forge your true family from the people who stand with you when the storm hits. If this story strikes a chord, if it forces you to question your own value, your own connections, your own strength, please leave a comment. I want to know, would you confront him publicly or would you vanish into the night? Share this with someone who needs to hear they aren't crazy and they aren't alone. And if you're drawn to raw, unfiltered, powerful stories of resilience, justice, and rising from the ashes, then subscribe to our channel. Make sure you hit that notification bell because the next story is even more gripping. I appreciate you listening all the way through. I know it was heavy, I know it was hard, but you witnessed my truth. That means everything. A brief advisory before we conclude. The narratives shared here are dramatized works designed to inspire reflection and conversation. If themes of profound betrayal, marital strife, or emotional turmoil are triggering for you, we encourage you to protect your peace and explore other content more suited to your well being. Always put yourself first. Until we meet again, be fierce, be honest, and never apologize for choosing yourself.